All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Kathy's the only one from the board who's not online right now. But I just wanted to start the meeting by welcoming all of you to what is actually the 6th annual meeting of the Board of Directors of the University of Utah nonprofit organization. And of course, as a reflection of the times, this is our first virtual meeting of the board. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. If you have questions that you would like to ask, you can do that either by unmuting your mic or by asking a question in the chat function. I've already uploaded the minutes from last year's meeting to the chat for the board members to review during this meeting. And then I'll call for a vote of approval of the minutes at the end of the meeting. We are a public NPO, so this meeting is being recorded. And I have activated the share screen function as well for everyone who's giving reports today. And reports will be presented, or at least slides for reports will be presented via the chat function. Anyone have any questions before we begin? All right, if not, then we'll go ahead and get started. There are a number of changes to the, well, let me put my slides up first. Now that I say that. Okay. All right, this is the org chart for the board. Whoops, go back. There are a number of changes to the board this year. First is we have a new board member. We also have a new officer of the NPO, and we are celebrating a very significant retirement from the board in the form of Mike Hardman. So Jay Lee, shown here on the screen, and you can see his picture also in the participants, is joining us, replacing Dr. Se-Young Kim as the representative of the Korean Alumni Association. Jay received a Master's of Bioengineering from the university in 1992. And then moved down the road to Provo to get a law degree. He now is a practicing member of the very prestigious Yulchon law firm in Seoul, Korea. Jay's been very active in the formation of the campus from the very beginning and has been a great friend of the University of Utah. And in fact, his daughter, Sandra, now is a medical student at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. So Jay, welcome to the board, and I'd like to provide you the opportunity to say hello to the board.
Well, thank you so much for welcoming me to the board. And I saw several people I know already, including my apartment and Sherry. And so, but I'm very honored to be a part of this important board of directors, and I'm looking forward to see you in person later when this coronavirus is ended, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. We're delighted to have you as a member of the board, and we appreciate your commitment to the University of Utah. We also have a new officer of the NPO, Greg Hill. Greg replaced Todd Kent as the Chief Administrative Officer in June of this year. Greg joins us from Boise State University, where he was a professor of political science and also head of the Idaho Public Policy Institute. Greg, I offer you the opportunity to say hello to the board.
Thank you, Chris, and thank all of you. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity. I've been here in Korea now for about six weeks or so, and it's exciting. It's challenging. I'll have a chance to give you a little bit more detail, but I've had a chance already to meet and visit with Jay Lee. I can sort of testify to what a great person he's going to be to the addition of our board as well. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and I want to thank each of you for putting your trust in me so we can continue to move the University of Utah Asia campus forward. So you'll hear from me again in a little bit, and so thank you very much again.
Thanks, Greg, and we're delighted to have you as the CAO at the campus in Korea, and we look forward to your vision playing out over the next few years. I also want to take an opportunity to acknowledge the contributions of Randy McCrillis. Randy joined the campus as the Dean of Students in 2016 and has, in addition, been serving as the interim Chief Administrative Officer from January of this year till June when Greg arrived. Randy's was really the driving force and really the steady hand at the helm, if you will, during the pandemic that was really focused in East Asia and Korea at the beginning of the year. And I think Randy's contributions and Randy's leadership are reflected best in the fact that during this pandemic, we did not lose a single international faculty member. And also, we did not lose students to the pandemic as well, either for illness or leaving the campus. And in fact, as I saw today in the data that Brian Byun sent yesterday, we've now gone over the recruitment number that we had for last fall. So even in the time of the pandemic, our recruitment continues to go up. And again, I just want to thank Randy. Randy will continue his role associated with the UAC in his new position, which is an executive director in the Office for Global Engagement. So again, Randy, thank you for everything you do for the campus and your continuing work for the campus. Finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're celebrating a very significant retirement from the University of Utah and also from the UAC NPO Board of Directors. I just want to take a couple minutes and show a couple slides to reflect on Mike's contributions to this, to the globalization of the University of Utah. So this slide just shows a timeline of some of the key components associated with the opening of the campus. And it starts really back in 2001 when the Korean government decided to create a new global city called Songdo International Smart City. And this was a public-private partnership with POSCO Corporation in Korea and Gale International in the United States. Fast forward 7 years, the city is now up and running. The first apartment buildings and residents moved in around 2008, 2009. And at that point, the Korean government decided to open or to invite universities to open what was at that point called the Songdo Global Campus. And the University of Utah was invited to be one of the original 4 universities on that campus. At that point, then President Michael Young invited Mike Hardman to spearhead this project. So the group that Mike put together between 2008 and 2010, and I'm supposed to be pushing my little buttons here, did a significant amount of due diligence and background work to decide whether or not this made sense for the University of Utah. And I think this was really a critical point in the globalization of the university to actually consider the value of opening up a campus overseas. And so in 2010, Mike Young signed an agreement with the Korean government to do a formal exploration of the campus. In 2012, the FSA was signed, and by that time, President Pershing had come into the office, and the EU began doing its meetings and trips to Korea. By 2013, the concept of an extended campus, and we always push in all of our discussions that this is not a franchise and it's an extension of the University of Utah, was approved formally by University of Utah leadership, including the Board of Trustees, and ultimately all the way up through Northwest accreditation. At that point, the Board of Directors was created for the NPO, and Mike was appointed as the inaugural president of the NPO and chair of the Board of Directors. Then in 2014, really began the active phase, if you will. The OSA was signed and approved by the Ministry of Education, and we opened our inaugural class for the campus in September of 2014. All of these milestones were accomplished under the guidance and watchful eyes of Mike Hardman. And I think it's not unreasonable to say that we wouldn't all be here today celebrating the amazing successes of this campus over the last 6 years if it hadn't been for Mike's vision for what the University of Utah could accomplish by creating an extended campus overseas. Here's just some pictorial history showing a very young and spry Mike Hardman talking at the
So long ago.
the groundbreaking ceremonies for the campus. And you'll see again now President Pershing for those groundbreaking ceremonies. And this is actually a picture I really enjoy here with showing President Pershing and Mike Hardman with President Song, who was the original president of the Songdo Global Campus Foundation. And President Song was the visionary on the Korean side that saw what all the opportunity would be. And then we have also in this picture some very distinguished legislators from the state of Utah in the form of Senator Urquhart and then Representative Grover and also Representative Hutchings. This is a picture that shows the grand opening of the campus in 2014. And we'll see a picture of that inaugural class in just a moment. And again, every step of the way, we could see Mike's vision and Mike's leadership, whether it was speaking to groups of students at orientation for the campus, or talking at the opening ceremony in 2017 for our beautiful Asia campus building, which you see in my background. There was always Mike there as the visionary and also the person who could execute the plan. And I think we owe Mike a great deal of gratitude for what he accomplished to get this campus started. Because again, we would not be here celebrating its success without Mike's very significant contributions. In honor of Mike's role in this project as he retires, I'm delighted to announce that Mike will be provided the honorific title of President Emeritus of the University of Utah Asia Campus, NPO. And although it's virtual, I ask everyone to please join me in congratulating Mike on these accomplishments and his continuing role. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, everybody.
Mike,
Thank
please
you.
say a few words.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, great. So, Chris, thank you so much for those very kind words. And I thank President Watkins and Senior Vice President Dan Reed for the emeritus status appointment. That's very important to me, and it keeps me connected to the board. I really want to say thanks to every board member that's here today, and also those who aren't members of the board but that contribute significantly, particularly those who are on the executive committee. One thing that Chris didn't mention was the importance of that executive committee and its connection to the board. And it was established actually before the board was established. It has been quite a ride. I looked at, when I got the slides and I started to look at the numbers that Chris was just talking about, they look pretty smooth. It looks like a pretty smooth ride from 2001 to 2014. And what it doesn't reflect is, and this gives me a chance, since this is my final board meeting really, to highlight some of the people who are actually behind those numbers. The numbers don't tell the story. The story is much more fascinating, challenging, uplifting, and also very, very scary. There were times when and I think for others as well who were involved, didn't think we were going to be able to get through. In 2008, when the campus possibility was brought to me by Insu Khan, it was really, I was the dean of the College of Education, and the proposal was, hey, the Korean government would like to have the College of Education at the U start a program in Sangdo, which of course I had never heard of. And I said, well, why the College of Education at the University of Utah? How did they know us? And he said, well, you're on the list for good colleges. Well, as it turned out, as I listened to Dr. Han, and we talked, and then we talked again for several months, it wasn't really about the College of Education as much as it was about the U establishing a full-blown campus. And the interest was much more, quite frankly, in biotech, not education, but much more in biotech. And it was really part of a global campus operation. So that period between 2008 and 2010, before we even approached Mike Young, was really one of, well, since we're really going to go beyond education, yes, was still one of the programs going to be considered, which, by the way, that dropped out because we couldn't figure out the licensure that's just the first issue we ran into. We couldn't figure out the licensure between Korea and the US. We started to talk with others, and particularly, I want to highlight some people who, before I even went to Mike Young, would say to me, "Okay, well, I'm not sure this is really going to be viable." And the first people I talked to, of course, were the legal people, and I know Robert. Is Robert on the call? Robert and Alice. I have to say, Robert Payne and Alice, very early on. It's important to note that any time between 2008 and even 2013, that we got a no. If we'd have had one no from several key people, or one key person, we got a no. It was over, and so we were very, 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 very much wanting to get a lot of people involved. So this really was going to be a campus-wide experience. For me, I want to say, I can't say enough about Robert Payne, and for those of you who were involved at that period of time, Robert Payne, Alice Whitaker, the legal aspects of all of this. What is it? What's going to be involved? What's the firewall between the University of Utah and at that time was just basically a promise for an Asia campus. And there were a lot of promises made, and we had to really work through very, 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 very carefully all the legal aspects. And to this day, we still deal with it. And the challenges were enormous in terms of legal issues, Korean labor laws, contractual relationships between the universities, up and down. I can't tell you how many trips we took to attempt to work through many of those challenges. And be able to say to the university, particularly the trustees and the president, the risk factors here are really going to be reputational, and we think we can work through the legal, and of course then became the financial. And Kathy Anderson was right there right from the beginning. I really have to mention Kathy, who did this, and I was about to go to a number of deans to see their interest, and Kathy looked at it and said, you know, you're just going to have to take a look at whether what does Robert say, what does Alice say, and have you talked to Mike Young? Well, of course, then I did go to Mike Young, and if you know Mike Young, he was a Japanese legal scholar, and the first thing he said to me is, "Why aren't we doing this in Japan?" And set us back a little bit, and said, you ought to take a look at Japan. I said, well, the invitation is got a lot of money tied to it that will support us for a number of years. And he said, well, so the promise is that there will be no state money spent on this campus. And I said, that's the promise. And of course, he said that's too good to be true. And he was willing to go and look at it, what we called a memorandum of understanding. Again, bringing in legal, bringing in Kathy, the contractual relationship. That 2010 MOA, which was actually an MOU, understanding, was a friendship agreement. And we still weren't there. We were working very, very hard. And now I had Kathy on board and Arne Combi, who was vice president. I said, I'm going to move Rob Muir into working with you. And that was, for me, was one of the most important things that happened in all those years when Rob came on. And he has been, from the beginning, on top of very, very complex and difficult, challenging financial issues, including trying to keep us from getting into a situation where we were violating the agreement for the use of state money and making sure that we kept our original promise, and that we were going to get, and that the Korean government was going to keep their original promise. So I can't say enough about Rob. Rob, he's still here. He's chair of the executive committee, and he's been here from the very beginning. And when we got into really the heart of what we were going to do in terms of setting up this campus, the first thing we did was do a feasibility agreement. Rob led that. Rob led our feasibility initiative to see whether, in fact, it was even viable for us to do that. All of this is taking place behind the scenes, and a lot of people haven't seen all that took place. We formed the executive committee, and of course, we had some deans on board, including the dean of humanities, the dean of behavioral science, the dean of education, medical dean, for all the programs that we were going to start, dean of social work. And so that's the time we brought in Martha Bradley. And Martha, I can't thank you enough, because the first thing we realized we had to do is figure out, well, we're not going to just offer majors, we're going to offer gen ed. And it was Martha who really figured out how we could do that. I think it's really critical to understand we spent almost with undergraduate studies, probably almost a year just trying to figure out, could we not only offer the curriculum, how would we schedule? How would we get students over there? How would we get students back here? How would each of the colleges participate? And what were the ramifications of trying to offer the exact same curriculum over at the UAC that we were offering in Utah? And from there, of course, things really got going, and I just can't say enough about President Pershing. From the first time I brought it to President Pershing after Mike Young stepped down and President Pershing came in, I brought this to him, and his comment to me was, well, this will be an interesting experiment. That scared me a little bit, because obviously in experiments, we're going to have a lot of variables, and how many variables can we control? I was just waiting for him to ask me, how many variables do you think we can control? And the real question was, what are we, what is it we don't know that we don't know? And we didn't know cultural aspects. We weren't sure about the finances. We were dealing with the curriculum. Where were we going to get faculty? I mean, all of this was all behind the scenes that we had to deal with. But President Pershing was key. He kept saying, "Okay, keep going, keep going." And I can tell you, we ran into some significant legal issues. And one was really in 2013 when Rob Muir came to me and said, "We're going to have to change. We're going to change state law." And I thought, "Okay, it's okay. That's it. I'm going home and have a martini. This is over. We are actually going to change the state law." Thanks to Rob's leadership and Jason Perry's leadership, we actually changed state law to allow us to operate a nonprofit organization, the first nonprofit, the university in Korea. That was Rob's doing. That was Rob, President Pershing, and support from some key state legislators we get that statement. And we owe Rob a great deal of praise, because basically this difficult process could have been the end right there. No, if we can't operate, if we can't get the state to change the law, we don't operate. And then, of course, we had President Pershing, who actually made 3 visits to the campus. The first visit he made, along with Barb Snyder, who student affairs was so critical at this time. Obviously, we had admissions issues. We had student issues that we had to deal with in terms of work. As Chris mentioned, we were going to be an extended campus. We didn't even know what that meant. And we didn't even actually find out what that meant from the Department of Education until almost 2 years later. We were operating, trying to figure out what it is it means to be an extended campus. And finally, we got word from the department that it means it's the University of Utah. And everything that goes on the main campus goes on at the UAC, period. Title IX, everything, absolutely everything. And we were looking at that going, okay, back to the legal. And we had to go through all of the factors that relate to student safety, ensuring that the curriculum was identical, that we had university qualified faculty, and so on. And the first visit, I just have to behind the scenes kind of thing. The first visit to President and Barb Snyder went with me and a contingency of, and I think, Martha, you were on that one trip as well. We went over to Sando and we were very excited, and we got there and there was just this wonderful, wonderful campus, buildings everywhere, and absolutely nobody there. I remember President Pershing turning very quietly to me and saying, kind of like a ghost town. And it was at that time. And for him to look at that and go, we're really going to bring students here and we're really going to be able to do this, was amazing to me. And on top of that, he also attended the opening ceremony, along with many of the key people who are here today. And as you know, as you can see from the slides that we're all going to be looking at, we had 13 students and probably 25 University of Utah administrators and leaders, and it was pretty interesting. And we were all in our gowns, and it was really quite a sight. Very fascinating. But it was a true celebration. And at that time, you think, okay, 13 students. Then you look at the slides that Chris is going to talk about in terms of where we are now and the numbers of students. And I am going to stop talking because that really takes us into the point where Chris came on board. The big turning point for us, and I have to say this, was Chris Ireland taking over as Chief Administrative Officer, bringing on Carrie Ellingson at that time as the Dean of Student Affairs. The building getting underway, which was also, I could tell you, I could spend 2 hours or more talking about how the building, what we had to go through to get that building looking like it looks now, and really what relationships we were going to be able to have with the Korean government to assure that they were meeting their obligations in terms of the importance of this building to our continued operation. Because we weren't in this building to begin with. We were located over in the administration building. And from the beginning with our recruitment team, the 2 Bryans and in particular, and even when Carrie was there, parents would come, and it didn't look like we were really going to be there for a very long period of time. It was very difficult to recruit students until we Chris and Carrie, Randy, and the building, and at that point we were actually able to take President Pershing over there, and he actually saw where we were going to be and what it was all going to be about, and it was actually going to be successful. I was very, very pleased when he said to me in 2000, I guess it was about 2014, he didn't use the word experiment anymore. He used the word campus, our campus. And that to me was all right. We've reached it. So I'm going to stop, but I since this is my last meeting, since this is my last meeting, and I hate the word retirement. I want to make myself available at any time to do anything I can to support the success of the campus. And I want to thank everybody who's here and all those people and individuals from the beginning and those who are here today. I particularly want to thank Jay Lee, and I want to Korean Alumni Association. They were critical at the beginning. Our very first meeting in 2009, when I went there, I walked in, and without me even knowing it, Korean Alumni Association officers were there. they came, they wanted to support us. It was amazing. President Kim and others, just from the very beginning, the Korean Alumni Association has been absolutely critical. And our Korean alumni, and I know Chris has given the background on our Korean relationship with Korean faculty over the years, and all that they have meant and all that they will mean and will continue to mean as we move forward. So Jay, I really want to say welcome to you. You're a critical part of the board. Our linkage with our Korean alumni and with the association is an essential part of who we are and our success for the future. I apologize if I left some people out, but I will stop. I think Chris has asked me to say a few words and I've gone way beyond, but this is my chance. I don't get another one. So my thanks to the board now. My thanks to all of those who were there at the beginning. In really getting us going. I think the early numbers don't reflect all of the complexities of what it took. It's really, if you go back to it, we're 12 years into this right now. 12 years of many people working on this, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And I once again I thank you for the appointment to emeritus status, and I hope to remain engaged as long as you'll have me. So, Chris, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mike. Again, thank you all.
I love Zoom applause. I love Zoom applause. Zoom applause is my favorite.
Mike, thanks for all that you've done to make this a success. We're really in your debt. So just huge appreciation for incredible effort. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan.
All right. Well, let's move into our report section of the meeting. I'm going to start with a slide that I think everyone has seen many times. So we're transitioning back to vision. And a lot of this reflects what Mike's vision was from the very beginning and what the university wanted to accomplish. And I'm not going to go through this slide. I only want to focus on this last bullet. Two of the things we really wanted to see here with the campus was a gateway for international student recruitment. And this is something that, as the numbers I think will show today, has been very successful. We are on the cusp of having 500 students enrolled at this campus. And if you consider the fact that the total international student population for undergraduates at the University of Utah is just about 1,000. You understand immediately the impact of adding 500 students through the Asia campus. It is quite significant. But the other thing we really wanted, again, because we were an extension, we wanted this to be a two-way street. And so we wanted the opportunity for students who were studying in Salt Lake City to have the ability to experience a global campus, a global educational experience in a very vibrant culture. As Mike alluded to, this turned out to be much more challenging than we ever thought it was going to be. But I think now we have really overcome those, and I'll report at the end of my presentation some of the exciting things that we're starting to do to offer opportunities for Salt Lake City students to now study at our Asia campus. So here is that 2014 group of 13 students, along with Brian Stabotsky. This was a very humble beginning. I think as any of you who were involved in the project, the projection was, and the sort of promise that we all thought would be true, was that there would be 200 students in this opening class, that magically from day one, all the students would be there. As it turns out, we've learned along the way that it's much harder to get to 200 students a year. Although now, as we are actually now just over 200 students coming in a year. But fast forward to 2019, and you see a very different picture than what we had in 2014. This is a class of 119 incoming freshman students. This was the largest incoming class in the history of the Asia campus at that time. But it also represented a couple other really important milestones. It was the fourth semester in a row, so starting back in 2018, this is the fourth semester in a row where the incoming class was the largest for the history of the campus at that point in time. Also, with 119 students coming in and the students that were already on the campus, this was the first time that our tuition revenue eclipsed $5 million. Here's what I alluded to a moment ago. If you look at growth, these are numbers of incoming students per fiscal year. You can see we were really flat through FY17. But then in FY18, things really started. So fall of 2017, things started to really pick up, and they're now growing quite steadily to the point where even in the middle of a pandemic, we had 208 students enroll as freshmen at the Asia campus in fiscal year 20. This slide shows the number of students that are actually on the campus paying tuition by semester. And you can see by spring 2020, again, we had 418 students paying tuition, generating that significant amount of tuition money. We also at that point had almost 140 or 150 students transitioning to the Salt Lake City campus a year. So in reality, the total enrollment for University of Utah Asia campus students is 508 students. So if you think about this and you look, even if we were to plateau out, but I've just told you we actually are seeing growth now for fall 2020 over what we had in fall 2019. But even if we just plateaued, 2 years from now, we would have well over 500 students paying tuition on the Asia campus, generating almost $9 million in tuition. And we would have over 150 students transitioning to the Salt Lake City campus. And those students generate or will generate over $4 million in revenue for the Salt Lake City campus. So this is really an exciting time because we have reached that point, I believe, of sustainability from a financial perspective. This shows the academic success of the students who transition to Salt Lake City from the Asia campus. These are the average GPAs for the cohorts for the time that they spend in Salt Lake City. And you can see that over the years, they've averaged over 3.5 GPAs, which is significantly higher than the average campus GPA at the University of Utah. So these students are very high performing students. They do extremely well academically. We started with 4 degrees, 3 undergraduate degrees and 1 master's degree in public health. In 2017, we made what I think was a very extremely difficult but important decision. We shuttered the social work program, but we brought on 3 new undergraduate degrees and then a second master's degree in biomedical informatics. So all of our master's degrees are in the health science campus area. But if you go back and you think about the addition of these 3 undergraduate degrees, and you look again at the growth of the campus, it becomes very clear very quickly that these 3 degree additions were important for the growth of the campus. And it was really a combination of 3 new degrees and also the name recognition that the campus was gaining in Korea that started our upward growth that continues to this day. Excitingly, we're going to go through another growth spurt in 2021. So starting in March of 2021, we will add 3 new undergraduate degrees. We'll add electrical engineering and computer engineering, and then also graphic design. And we anticipate that just like we saw in 2018 or 17, that a year and a half after we start those degrees, we will see a huge jump in the student population. So I'm going to finish my presentation and talk a little bit about the Global Leap Korea program. This is a program that Sherry Daly and Sabina Klar in the Office for Global Engagement and Marty Bradley's group created to create essentially a pipeline or an opportunity for Salt Lake City students to spend a semester or a year studying in Korea. And we build it, as you see on this slide, 2 unique campuses, 1 great University of Utah experience. And up at the top here is the URL. I encourage you to look at the website. It's part of the LEAP program, which are the learning environment groups. This is a cohort experience. In general, these are 2 semester and 2 semester freshman experiences where the students would spend their fall semester in Salt Lake City, taking a variety of undergraduate courses in general ed and also in global studies, and then spend the spring semester in Korea at the Asia campus. We started this right before, or we started developing this concept right before the pandemic hit in full swing. And we had done all the work to create the curriculum, to develop with Marty's group the faculty who would be in charge of the LEAP cohorts. Everything was all set up, and then the pandemic hit. We had planned a hard marketing launch for this incoming fall semester of 2020. And we really anguished significantly over whether or not to suspend the concept for a year and start it back up in 2021. But we decided after some discussions to do a soft launch. So we didn't really do a hard marketing campaign, but we did create 1 sheets that were sent out to all the incoming freshman students to see if there was any interest in students who would potentially want to go to Korea in spring of 2021. We set our sights on a minimum of 10 students and anguished about maybe we should go to 5 because we thought that we probably wouldn't get students to enroll this year because of the pandemic. And we set a max, which is I think standard for the LEAP groups, of 20 students. And I'm pleased to announce that as of about 2 weeks ago, we had 19 students signed up for this program to go to Korea in spring of 2021. And again, in the time of pandemic. So I think this is just a great, it's a great statement about so many aspects of the University of Utah, about our global campus, about our UGS programs that Marty's team has put together that are exciting freshman students to take on new challenges. And I think this is a wonderful statement about where we are with this campus and the true value that this campus offers to the University of Utah as a global leader in education. And so with that, I'm going to stop my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. Mike, you're muted.
There we go. I'm off. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I think it's important to note that one of the aspects of why we are so successful, and Chris and Marty is that, and all the work that they've done, is that it's the extended campus means these students that are going over there from the University of Utah are not learning abroad students. And so it is not technically a learning abroad experience. It is a University of Utah experience. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because I think that for students in terms of recruitment is a really important part of how this program is going to expand. And they will get the same University of Utah experience they would get on main campus from an academic standpoint. Cultural aspects of all this, the social interaction, all what's going to happen at this hub is going to be a remarkable experience for students. And it has been for those students who have been there.
Any additional questions or comments? And again, I remind you that you can also ask questions through the chat mode as well. If not, we'll move to the CAO report from Greg Hill. And Greg, the share screen function is up.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Let me make this, let me get this up and ready to go. Thank you for that report, Chris. That was really good. Let me make sure we can get on. Okay. Let's make sure we share the right screen. Sorry about that. Give me just a second. Okay. Are you seeing my screen now at all, or?
No, not yet.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me just back out here and see if we can figure out what to do. Chris, I want to thank you for that really good report and getting us started here. You know, and I will echo what Chris said from about Mike. You know, when I got started here, when I interviewed, my first conversation here was with Chris on the phone back in October, and he was talking to me about this really exciting job and about all the really great things. And then early on, he got Mike involved in the conversation. And you know, Mike, it seems to me, and Mike, you and I haven't had that many interactions, but the ones we have, there's something that I noticed. And as I walk around the halls of campus here, I see a phrase on the wall, and I think we saw it in one of Chris's pictures. And that phrase was step 1, imagine, and step 2, do. And it seems to me, Mike, that you are an exemplification of that phrase. I mean, the history that you gave and the fact that we were able to climb our way through to be able to execute on this vision is just, it's really nothing short of miraculous. And so I also want to thank you for the work that you've done. And you know, if I back up to February, and when I went down to Salt Lake to interview, if we remember the times when we could all meet together, you couldn't help but catch the enthusiasm from Mike, and I could tell I wasn't completely clear on how much interaction you had until I really got here and started looking at the background. And so again, I want to thank you and congratulate you on the
thank you so much, Greg, and welcome. We're so happy you are here.
Oh, thank you. I also want to start by acknowledging Randy McCrillis too. You know, I can't imagine taking over a job as an interim CAO in a moment when the whole system feels like it's falling apart. And the fact that Randy was able to hold the ship together and keep everybody motivated and make really hard decisions by himself, essentially, you know, I think that deserves great praise. And so I thank you, Randy. I wish we had more time here together, but, you know, and your willingness to continue to reach out to me as I get started here. Let me just introduce myself a little bit. I think I've met many of you before. We've talked, most of us have talked to some degree, but I'll tell you first why this job is so interesting to me. When Todd Kent reached out to me and said that this job was becoming available, Todd and I have known each other for a long time. He talked about it's a type of position where it's easy to see, or it's quick to see these really interesting successes. And I didn't really understand what he meant by that at first, but he said that the people you work with, it's an intimate environment, and you know, the experience you'll have here will be like no other experience you'll ever have in your professional career. And I said, Todd, I have a job that I really enjoy, in a place that I really enjoy, but there was something that kept tugging me about this job. And as some of you know, that I have some history with Korea, having lived here in the early 90s, and as a missionary, and being able to live with Korean people and engage with them on a very personal level, learning the language. Spending time here was just a really unique opportunity from a personal perspective. And furthermore, my wife is a Korean American who doesn't have any interaction, hasn't to date had much interaction with Korea. And my children, 3 of my 4 children came over with us, and we were, you know, they're able to explore a piece of their heritage that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to explore. And I think it's important for you to understand that not only did this seem like a really great professional opportunity for me, to be part of something that's growing and building, and but also the personal side of it. I think I wanted to share that with you because I hope that it helps exemplify the commitment that I really have towards this endeavor, and just the joy that I felt as I've been here for the past few weeks and starting to engage with the stakeholders, both internal and external. And furthermore, you know, there's nothing quite like watching Korean baseball games, and so I wanted to do that too. And so, but now I watch those on TV and can't watch them in person yet. But anyway, so from a professional perspective, this seemed like a really great opportunity. And so again, I'm thankful for the opportunity that you all have given me to be part of this adventure. I want to share with you some numbers here. I think you've seen these or can probably deduce what they mean, but you know, this is our 7th year, and Chris has shown you our track record. I'm going to show it again, just in case anyone happens to forget. But the 32, we have 32 dedicated faculty members. You know, when I first came, I took the opportunity to meet with each and every one of them on a one-on-one basis. We spent a half an hour together. I was able to hear their stories, learn their motivations, talk to them a little bit more about what their goals were and what their mission was. And that has been a very enlightening and exciting opportunity for me. I feel, even though I've only been here a short time, feel very close to these faculty. And in my role as Dean of Faculty, this was something that I felt was important to do. And I will tell you now, and I'll tell you again a little bit later, that we have very dedicated faculty here that work really hard to make this experience for our students just as reflective of the University of Utah Salt Lake campus experience as it can possibly be. The number 9 reflects the number of programs we will have starting in the spring of 2021. These programs I'm excited about. We'll talk a little bit more about them. And then that number 506, actually should be 508, I believe, is the number of students that we have now enrolled as UAC students. And so these numbers mean a great deal to me, and I'm excited to watch them continue to grow. These are the programs that we offer. you've seen, the blue are the original programs that are still here. The red are the programs that we have phased in our second phase that Chris mentioned. And then these green programs, the graphic design, electrical engineering, and computer engineering, are the programs that are on their way. And we recognize the challenges and difficulties of starting a program, but I can tell you, in a sort of off the record way, we haven't officially started recruiting for these programs. We anticipate getting Ministry of Education's green light for final approval by the end of this month. And our admissions team and our PR group are ready to go with some recruiting strategies for all of these programs. But I can tell you that there's great interest in all of these programs, and we feel really strongly that graphic design, computer engineering, electrical engineering will greatly benefit the entire campus. We really feel like student enrollment is going to go up. That there's going to be great interest in here, and Chris and I actually had this discussion earlier. I'm much more. I proposed some much more aggressive numbers than Chris did, but I think his are probably more correct. But I just got so excited about these students coming in that I got a little excited about my projections. But I'm confident that we're going to be able to recruit, and we have a good strategy for it. So these are the areas I want to cover in the next few minutes. We're going to talk first about the promotion of the brand. I'm going to spend a few minutes on the partnerships that we've started to facilitate, talk a little bit more about our faculty, and then the student recruitment. I think I'm going to skip the financial growth part. Chris talked about it, and I think that Rob's going to talk about that as well. And then I'll spend a few minutes on the future challenges here. But really, when it comes to promotion of the brand, I think we've seen this before. I've updated the U.S. News and World Report numbers from the Global Universities Report. This is an important number to us, I think, because it really places into perspective where we sit with our, who we would consider our peer universities here in Korea. The Sky universities rank very high, but only Seoul National ranks higher than us. And Ghent, as you know, offers a very limited number of programs. And so of the universities on this list, I think we can feel very confident in that the diversity of offerings that we have are attractive to many different types of students, and that we can continue to raise our profile. And that leads to a conversation on what our goals here are and our mission when it comes to building the University of Utah's Asia campus. This is a screen that you've probably seen before. It's something that as we interviewed, as we talked about what we want to do with the University of Utah's Asia campus, it encapsulates all of the different ideas that we want to meld together to provide that experience that we've promised our students and that we'll give them. That we want to build this really strong base of loyal students that'll help promote the campus in the future. This is something that we're in a new position for. We're now starting to get graduates. We're starting to see them enter the workforce. I'm going to show you a chart in a little bit about what we know so far about our graduates and what they're doing. But they're going to play a really important role, especially as we get them engaged with our University of Utah Alumni Association. And one of the other things that I emphasized when I was applying for this job is the experiential learning and internship opportunities. And I believe as we continue to do that, we can also, as they get jobs, rely on them for internship opportunities for our students, and then the cycle can just magnify from there. The second, if you look in the bottom right corner, bring the University of Utah academic and student experience to the Utah Asia campus. And this is something that started well before I got here. The student experience here, to the best of our ability, we're working on recreating. I'm going to talk again in a few minutes on the impacts of the coronavirus, but we feel very strongly that that's one of our core values, that these students will have opportunities to do what they would otherwise do on the Salt Lake campus, and they can have that experience here. One of the things that's going to help that greatly is what Chris talked about at the end of his presentation on the LEAP program. Being able to have more students from the Utah campus here will help the students that are here full-time create experiences that they can glean knowledge and experience from those Utah students, not just in the academic environment, how we engage, how we think critically and so on, but also in the student life part. Again, we've been constrained on that, not as much as Salt Lake has, but we're working around some of those constraints. I'm also going to talk a little bit later on in my presentation about the faculty that we're hiring. And this is a good opportunity for me to thank each and every one of you from the departments who are working so hard to get us faculty that are representative of your departments. As I look down our list and I look at the places where our faculty are coming from, I'm very impressed, and I'm also really impressed with what they're doing while they're here. We have them teaching heavy workloads, teaching loads. 331 is a heavy teaching load. Yet some of them are still finding opportunities to research. They're doing service in the greater Songdo and Incheon community, and they're working very closely with our external partners. And then the final piece, and this is where Chris ended his, was on the subsidies. That it's our mission and our goal to spend the subsidy and tuition money wisely in an effort that we can become self-sufficient. So I'll circle back to that on the end as well. But those are the core values that we're trying to accomplish here. The next thing I'm going to show you is some of the ways that we're upgrading the campus here. Some of you, it may have been a while since you've been here, but these are just some shots of the things that we've been working on. If you look here on the 9th floor, we're creating a green room. Actually, this is half green, half white room for our film media arts group and our communications group. This has been an exciting, long process. They work directly above my office if you've been here, and so it's I've been intimately involved. At least I know when they're working and when they're not, because it's one of those opportunities. So that's a really neat project. And that'll be done by week's end. On the 2nd floor, we did some rearranging in our advising room and created some really nice spaces for our advisors and admissions people to talk with students. And the picture doesn't do it service, but this is a really, really nice room. And then the bottom picture here is the lounge area that we've redone. When Mike was talking about the first entry into the building, this was sort of the hallway area that led into the main corridor. This is now a really nice open space that we can use for gatherings. We can social distance here and move the tables. There's a large TV on the back wall where we can show things. So that's a really, really nice space as well. So in terms of promoting the brand, we're not just outside talking about how great it is, but we're investing heavily into the infrastructure and the building itself as a tool for recruitment, and I believe it's working well. The next piece that I want to talk about is partnerships. One of my goals when I became the chief administrative officer was to build community partnerships and strengthen the partnerships that we already have. I'm going to show you a slide that, again, you've seen before, but this is indicative of our relationships with our partners. So if we look at the purple dots here, we can think of the purple dots as our students and our parents. They're very closely encapsulated within the large UAC bubble. The blue dots are the Korean government components that we interact with often. And then when we think about the yellow dots, we're thinking about our alumni and business partners. finally, the third, the green dots would be the high schools that we are actively recruiting from. And part of what I'm trying to do at the moment is get a better handle on the relationships that we have in the yellow dots, or with our alumni or with our business partners. And I'll just show you a couple of examples. I should also say that we've started a campaign. James Park there, as you know, most of you probably know James. James came up with, he's going to make me famous. I would suggest that you all follow my Instagram page. I don't know what it's called yet, but James has decided that he's going to make me famous on Instagram. And we're going to start a Throw Up Your You campaign. So everybody we meet with, we convince them that they need to throw up their U, and we're going to put a picture up and use that as a tool, for a branding tool and a promotion tool. But you might recognize some of these folks we met with. This is Chairman Lee. I think most of you have met him, one of our big donors. This over here in the top right is the commissioner of the IFES, and I'll talk a little bit more about our conversation that we had earlier this month. Both of these two gentlemen are really supportive of what we're trying to do. And then down here is the founder, in the center is the founder of Megabox, which is a multiplex movie theater franchise. And the Megabox founder has been very supportive of us, both our film and media arts program and our communications program. And all of these gentlemen are people that we're meeting with consistently. We're meeting with many more. I just didn't want to put the pictures up, but it's been a really neat opportunity for me to go out and build and to meet the people that you all started these relationships with. And we're hoping to build and continue to strengthen those relationships. As people better understand our brand, they're better able to sell us. And again, it's all circular with our student success. Here's a sort of a snapshot of some of the people that we're working with on a regular basis. Again, as you remember, one of my goals is to increase the internship opportunities for our students. It's much more difficult to do internships here than it is in the US, but we're working closely with most of these organizations. We've recently signed an MOU with the Korea Times, and our journalism students are working. We have 2 of them who are going to do internships there this semester, and more coming on the way. We also, with Arirang TV, we've signed an MOU, and again, we're about to sign an MOU with Edelman, which is a PR firm. Some of these, we have interns at the Yongin Mental Hospital working on counseling. Jones International Christian School, we're working closely with, and again, Megabox is going to do some of that. So an example of our partnerships, I think they're growing, and it's a real pleasure for me to go and interact with those folks. I enjoy it very much, and we can talk more about some of the other ones if you're interested. In terms of quality faculty, I'm going to show you the list of new faculty that we hired for the spring and fall semester. And as you look down the list, you'll see that this is an impressive group of people, that we are excited to have them on board, and are excited to continue to fill out this cohort of instructors. Like I said, I've been able to meet with each one of them. This particular group, they've been real troopers. I mean, they showed up to campus but never met with any students yet. They haven't had the opportunity to meet with students or in person because of the pandemic. And then, so they are excited to get in the classroom. I'm going to talk in a minute about hopefully that we'll be able to do that in the fall. It starts next week, but this is a pretty strong group of people, and it's just indicative of, again, of you as faculty, departments, and the vetting processes that you use. Not only do we gain faculty, but every once in a while we lose them, and this is a sad moment for the UAC when Paul Rose announced that he's retiring, and this is his farewell party we had earlier this week. Paul is now back in Utah, and we miss him greatly, and his influence we missed. He was here for a very long time and had a really, really strong impact on the communications department and the UAC as a whole. In terms of student recruitment, I'm gonna, again, this is the table you just saw, but I just, you know, I see this table and I'm just blown away by this progress and this growth, and you know, this is something that we're committed to increasing and to continue and maintaining growth on. And this number is really one that kind of takes my breath away, that we're at that number right now. And so, and the fact that we have 90 students on campus. Let me just take, actually, I'm going to show you this next slide before we do this, but this is the current students by major and hours. And so you can see how our students are progressing through the program. And, you know, Randy will talk more about our students when I wrap up here. But again, this is a note that we're going to continue to see. This got me thinking about, you know, how does Korea compare with other international other countries when it comes to international students? You know, I was able to find some data on that, and we can see from this table that Korea makes up about 5% of total international students. And you know, we're going to send more students over to the U.S. I know it's sort of a different structure, but this was really indicative. But the next thing that I found, and this I thought was really great. This is from a website called Statista, which is a well-recognized statistics membership website that I belong to. And this is the highlighted part. It talks about higher education in Korea and then mobility. But it says it's becoming an increasingly popular destination among international students. And then it talks specifically about our campus. They call the Songdo Global Campus. Part of the business district of Songdo was implemented in order to provide an opportunity for Western colleges and universities to operate in South Korea, potentially reducing the brain drain caused by students leaving the country to study abroad. Now that was published on June 22nd of this year. So we're starting to get some notoriety. People are recognizing what our mission is, and this I thought was very positive news. I talked a little bit about a minute ago about what we know about our students. This is what we know about our graduates right now. Almost half of them are working, have jobs that are working, and then 17% of them are in graduate school. A small fraction are military. And then we have roughly 33% that are either looking for work right now, or we don't have the data on them. But you know, this graph is just a little bit misleading in that, let me give you an example. Of our 2017 class, 23 of the 25 people who graduated in 2017 are either working or in graduate school. And I think we'll continue to see that with the classes as time rolls on. Example of places where you find our students working are Morgan Stanley, Yonsei University, the Utah Public Health Department, Green Umbrella Children's Care Foundation, Guerrilla Film, the Spanish Embassy, and Arirang TV. And that feels like a pretty strong group. And so I know that part of what our next mission will be is to make sure that we can continue to develop those pipeline processes and make sure that we can get our students back to work. I'm gonna go ahead and skip over the financial growth part, and we'll let Rob talk about that. But I want to move on now to sort of this portion of future challenges. Now this is something that we're all facing worldwide, but I wanted to talk a little bit, if you weren't aware fully, of what's happening with the coronavirus environment in Korea. Pretty much anywhere you go in Korea, some people are wearing masks. It's got to be 90 or 95%. Any building you walk into, you'll get temperature checked. And those of us who are lucky enough to come over right now had the opportunity to get at least one and sometimes more coronavirus tests. So they're very aggressive. If you follow the news, I'm sure you know what's going on. And just some stats as of when I sent this PowerPoint to Jill on the 10th of August, the total number of tests in Korea were 1.6 million, and the total number of confirmed cases were 14,626. Now, of those, only 389 confirmed cases were in Incheon, which is really comforting. They've been really careful in Incheon, and so the total deaths in Korea since coronavirus started was 305, and that's been pretty stable. When I put this together, the rolling average, 7-day rolling average was 33. Now that number has changed drastically in the last couple of days. Over the weekend we had an outbreak, and so our new rolling average is 114. We had 23 on the 11th of August, and then we had 35 on the 12th, and we moved up. And by the 14th, we're at 85. On the 15th, we had 155. And on the 16th, on Sunday night, there were 267. Now, most of these are linked to a specific church in Seoul, but it has a trickle-down impact on us. And that trickle-down impact is that Korea moved Seoul and Gyeonggi-do up from level 1 to level 2. Now, Incheon wasn't part of that initially, but Incheon has recently moved to level 2, which means that we can't have any gatherings more than 50 people indoors, and outdoor gatherings less than 100. As over the summer and in the spring and summer, Randy and his team worked really hard to create some protocols for us. We fall within our current operations, which we're planning, which is 80% of our courses to be in person, 20% online. They fall within those protocols. We don't have any classes that are over 35. And just out of an abundance of caution, we've decided to move our student orientation meetings this week online. We're sorry we had to do it, but it's the right thing to do. And so some other precautions that we've taken on campus, if you look in the top right corner in our computer, we have 5 computer labs here. We put plexiglass dividers around each computer. And so this is the only situation where we have students sitting next to each other. We have plexiglass dividers. This contraption here on the left is a thermo scanner temperature check. It can scan up to 7 people at one time, I believe, and is accurate within 0.2 degrees. So we'll be able to move students through a little bit quicker. We have a really strict mask policy on campus, as you might guess, and we've staggered start times. We're trying to make sure that we can move students through without them violating the social distancing rules. But we feel like we're doing as much as we possibly can. Everyone who comes into our building gets temperature checked and either scans their ID card or signs the logbook. This has become more important than I realized. Earlier last week, we had an international student come to campus, and she came to campus before she got her test done, and was sort of wandering around campus and interacted with one of our community members. And so we were able to go to the logbook and scan and CCTV data and find out who she interacted with. And luckily she tested negative, thank goodness. But we were able to know, we knew exactly who she interacted with and who those people had interacted with. So we're able to manage any potential outbreaks. So we're doing our level best to make sure that our campus stays safe. In fact, that's the most important thing for us at this moment. One of the other challenges that we're facing right now is, or maybe it's not a challenge, but one of the opportunities we have up in front of us is some faculty development opportunities. We've decided that we're going to invest a little bit more in faculty development and help our students be able to, or our faculty be able to expand their development opportunities. So we provided them with a little bit of resources that they can attend conferences or use professional development funds to do a teaching conference or however they decide that it would help them be more innovative, be more self-directed, and especially now that they have to learn to teach online. We have to adapt to this constantly moving target. And so with the ultimate goal is that adaptation will filter down to our students, and our students then will be able to also integrate these key components in their own learning experiences. Let me talk just for a minute on growth at UAC. Right now, again, we have a total number of faculty at 32. We have a total number of staff at 21. And then our students are at 508. This is an important number for us because with the increase of students, our staff number has stayed relatively stable. And I just want to take a minute and acknowledge them, although none of them are on this, of course. But you know, our staff works incredibly hard. They're dedicated, they're devoted, and every semester we're bringing in more students, and we're asking them to do more and more. And so, you know, one of our goals is to create a strategy for making sure that we have enough staff support, that our student experience and our faculty experience is what we want it to be. And with the introduction of our new programs, this is what our spring hiring looks like. We're going to hire 2 graphic design faculty. We're going to hire 2 from electrical and computer engineering. We're likely to hire a psychology faculty member. We need to replace Paul Rose in communication, and film media arts is going to hire an animation faculty member. And then we have on our docket to hire foreign language, the Spanish and Korean faculty as well. So there's lots of growth coming, which we're very excited about. And I think as we look at the financial side, we're also able to see some of the opportunity out in front of us to do this. And so, you know, this UAC is going to look a little bit different a year from now in terms of our faculty, and that I can't be more excited about. And I'm excited really to work with each and every one of you as department chairs or representatives to make sure that we can be as supportive as we possibly can to help you get these people on board. Briefly, I'm way over time here, but briefly, let me just mention a couple of faculty highlights here. This is from our urban ecology faculty member, Razul Hassan, and a student won a presentation award, which was really exciting. Just a couple of highlights. We've got a faculty member in film media arts who's completing a documentary project on the first female filmmaker in Korea. Very interesting. It should be done by the end of the year, early next year. Mi-kyung Kwan, who's a psychology faculty member, has 2 grant-funded projects, research projects with Seoul National University. One with Seoul National, and the other with Ulsan National Institute of Science and Technology. And the total on those grant projects is $7 million. And so Mi-kyung is working really hard, and we're excited to hear that number as well. And then, you know, another writing and rhetoric highlight, they're doing, they've had a lot of people who are continuing to publish professional manuscripts, book manuscripts, conference, poems, essays, and so on. So our faculty are not just doing excellent teaching work, but they're also engaging in other parts of the discipline. And let me just end again with this picture. When I met with the commissioner of IFES, I asked him one question: how can we help you and IGC continue to be successful? And he said, we'd like you to increase your student population and to become financially stable. And I'm really happy to report that we're doing both of those things. Like Chris mentioned, that we are becoming financially stable in a very timely manner. And you saw the trends of our students. We're doing a lot of other things. For example, bringing the Center for Medical Innovation over here. That's helping with our community relationship building. People are very excited about that. And so from my perspective, you know, I can't believe how lucky I am to walk into an organization that's already moving in a very fast pace and positive directions. And my hope is that we continue to build this and continue to grow over time. So thank you very much. I know I apologize for going over time, but I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to share that information.
Thanks, Greg. Questions for Greg?
I apologize. I wasn't checking the chat feature as I was going, but.
This is Mike Barber. This isn't really a question so much as a comment. I mean, the quality of the faculty is great. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of interest from some very high quality people to go there and to help with our education. And I think that's going to continue to grow as our student and reputation grows. Our faculty member, Nick, that was just hired this year, he gave up a tenured position as a full professor in order to go over there. And we just had our first, as you know, our first person who wants to do a sabbatical leave
Right.
there. And so this is great news.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And I did see some comments about their certificate program. And this is something that actually the community here, we're talking with our community partners here, starting to talk about the certificate opportunities, which they're really excited about. And I think that we can help build that as well. So that I think will be another feather in the cap, and should get us more knowledge and recognition from our community partners as well. I will say just briefly, if I happen to be meeting with one of Korea. Korea, as you know, is a hotbed for gaming. People love it here. And we met with the president and founder of one of the best gaming teams here in Korea, called Dragon X. You can look them up. And I will admit this, first of all, by saying that I have no idea about anything about gaming or that world at all. But when I mentioned that we were bringing graphic design and ECE over, the first question they asked me was, can you also bring a gaming degree over? And so they were really, really excited about that opportunity. So I said, well, we'll talk about it. We'll see what happens next. But so there's lots of interest.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Greg, very much. And as I said at the very beginning, we look forward for where you're taking the campus in the future. I think it's a very exciting time for us. As you say, you've come into this at a time of tremendous opportunity and a great opportunity for us to grow. All right. Our next presentation is from Randy McCrillis.
Okay, I will share. Hold on. Oops. Hold on. It won't share for some reason. Sharing the wrong screen. Hold on. See if we can do this again. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to go through quickly, just kind of talk about the year, give highlights, talk about what happened this year. So just a quick reminder on this last year around where we were at and what happened. So we had the largest incoming class in the fall, as everybody's talked about, but that also meant that we had the greatest number of students on campus since our inception. And so with that came some great things. It was also our 5th year anniversary of celebrations. And so we did a lot of things in the fall to celebrate those 5 years. We had done some more programming. We really looked at how do we bring our alumni back to campus. We did our first ever football barbecue. It was an awesome event. There were probably about 170 people that showed up for it. Todd and I cooked hot dogs all day. And it was just one of those really nice community events where we had people come on campus who were both connected to the U or connected to the United States in some way, And it was a great way to celebrate that American culture on campus. The other thing that we noticed in the fall that was really clear was that we were going to be running out of space. With the intention of our spring class being the largest ever, where we were bringing in around 130 students, we figured that if each one of those students brought a parent with them or two to our orientation, there was no space on campus that was going to be large enough to house everyone. And for those of you that have been to campus in my 4 years of being there, space has never been an issue. We always had ample space. There was always lots of space. It was always one of those conversations of what do you do with all of that? And for the first time ever, we were in this place of we don't have enough space and we don't have a single room large enough to host everybody. So as Greg showed you earlier, one of the things we decided to do was to remodel our first floor to make it much more of an open programming space. We created some more programming space on the 8th floor for flexibility. And then with our thought and process around bringing in new majors, we created a chroma key and a dark room for our upcoming graphic design class. So the fall was really around that. And then we moved into spring where we saw our largest incoming spring class. And then obviously, as everybody now knows, COVID hit. And I think we were the first to kind of experience COVID. And in terms of leadership, it was one of those where it was decisions into the unknown. Where I had no clue what decision to make. I felt like I was making a decision, and in 24 hours, I was making a different decision. And one of the things I would say that I learned through that, and I think we all can attest to that, is that there was no planning. Didn't matter what decision we were going to make. It was how flexible can we be? And I think, as Chris said earlier, we didn't lose any students through the spring. In fact, the only students, our international student, one came back to the States, but because we had moved things online, was still able to stay enrolled. And I think that's a testament really to faculty. More than anything else, our faculty were phenomenally flexible. They were present for our students. They were there for the students. And that's why I think our students stayed, was really because the faculty support, the faculty outreach to our students really speaks to the quality of our faculty here. Also during the spring, one of the things I think that I'm most proud of that we did is we created an undergraduate research fund where we are going to put $50,000 a semester into a fund for students to get research grants. And it's modeled after the Europe program on the Salt Lake campus with a few modifications. We're going to fund 3 different types of research through the campus. One is kind of an exploratory, so looking at those students who don't really have an idea of what they'd like to explore or an idea around research. We're going to fund them to maybe do a lit review or to go do some exploring around what might be a topic. Then we're going to do.
Hey, Randy.
Yeah.
Are you sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you're not.
Not showing?
No.
Sorry. Should have said something.
Well, I thought you were leading into it.
Oh, no. It says shared. All right, let me try again.
I put it in the chat.
Sorry.
Yeah.
How's that?
There we go. Okay, now we can see it.
Sorry. Yeah, it showed on my screen as sharing. So in the, hold on, I'll move this out of the way. With that, then, with our undergraduate research star, we are doing 3 areas. So we're doing exploratory. We're going to do much more of an empirical. So students have already got an idea of what they'd like to do. And then knowing that we've got creative majors on campus, we're going to fund creative research through that. All students have to have a faculty mentor who go through this program. So it also is highlighting our faculty's research, which we're kind of excited about. The first cohort will be awarded this fall. And last year, what we had experienced is we did a research symposium with our students, and I was blown away at the quality of undergrad research that was going on campus. We had about 40 different students that presented at it all across the board, and it's really what drove this decision to create a research fund. Then obviously with Todd leaving in December, we began a CAO search, and I'm so thankful that Greg showed up on campus and was able to come. It was a CAO search like none other. We planned for them to be on campus, then we kept moving it, and I kept moving it, and Greg was flexible through the whole process. We finally ended up doing it on Zoom. Thankfully, Greg had already been to campus. I don't know if he hadn't been, I don't know if he would have taken the job. It's interesting to do it all through Zoom and then to fly thousands of miles away to land in Korea to take over that job. Then summer, if you're not aware, we had planned summer to be in person, and we were raring to go that we had done this whole online thing in the spring. Our numbers were down in Korea. We had planned everything to be in person. We got through our first week of in person, and unfortunately had a COVID case that didn't happen on campus, but that we got some pushback that we needed to move everything online. And so very quickly we moved summer online, and we didn't lose any student in that process either. Our numbers were the same that they had been before we were in person when we went online. Also, I will be honest, during the summer, I was kind of in this la-la land where everything was going to be fine in the fall and we were going to return to in-person and we didn't have to worry about COVID anymore. Korea's numbers were so low. And then looking at what happened with the summer term, as Greg said earlier, a group of us came together to really talk about, all right, what's our plan for the fall? So the committee created, as we've sent out to everybody, a different leveling of what happens. How do we move between the levels? Where do we start? We created syllabi statements. We created statements around Zoom for the campus, really to help prepare faculty. And one of the things we said is we would have decision markers that would determine when we would move from one level to the next. And that once we achieved that level, we wouldn't move back, which felt totally different than spring. Spring, it was nebulous. We didn't know if we were moving up. We didn't know if we were moving back. But I think we've landed on a much firmer stance of how we're going to move the campus forward this fall. And now with Greg being there and the team that's there, I think they're really well prepared for how to move forward. Talk about admissions. So as you can see in this, it is again, our largest increase. It was a 30% increase for our fall in terms of recruitment. Our spring was a 10% increase. It was our largest incoming class ever. We have over $1 million in USD for tuition revenue for spring, which was the first time we had really broken through that $1 million in revenue. That's after we take out their student scholarships. Our target rate for our incoming students has always been 10%, and for fiscal year 2020, we were under it. We were at 9.8. And I really think that's a testament to our admissions team and their ability to recruit high ability students who really want to be at the UAC and who are not driven just by a scholarship. And we've maintained, which is our highest, is a 70% admit matriculation rate for FY19 and 20. A couple of highlights around recruitment events. We are seeing our largest information sessions that we have ever had, and that's both with Zoom and in-person recruitment events. So our information session in December of 2019, we had 150 participants come, which is huge for us. Before that, our largest had been about 60 to 70. We've also have stronger pipelines with our domestic and Korean high schools. And then now we're offering online webinars for international students, which is not something we had done before the spring. I think with students and parents getting familiar with Zoom in this online format, I think we're going to have more students that are going to show up for this. That as parents become more familiar with, I'm doing Zoom for work, so I can now do Zoom for an information session, we'll continue to see those increase. And then our other one is that we started to purchase ads in our US military-based high schools with ads, and then also with posters in those high schools, and we've seen that increase. Our spring recruitment was our largest international population we've seen, and of that, the majority of that is from the United States. If folks have heard me talk before about KCON, KCON is the Korean pop culture conference that happens in LA every year. This year we went, and we were the only educational sponsor at KCON again this year. The University of Utah Asia Campus had a video that played that I showed you all last year at the board meeting. Just so you know, this year we had 10,000 interactions as a result of that online, 750 contacts were collected, and then our increase on our social media, we had 8,400 likes. This year, I'll talk about next year, but this summer we did KCON again. It was moved online, and our Google Analytics is unbelievable in terms of students were watching KCON as an online platform. Then we got to engage. If they clicked on our banner, we have all the click-through rates, where those students were based. So in the United States alone, we had 325,000 clicks where students watched our banner and then they clicked through as a result of seeing that. So that's a huge increase for us that we wouldn't have been able to achieve if we had not gone to KCON this year. Talk a little bit about marketing and public relations. Again, strong for us. We've seen huge increase. I think it's the highest number of news coverages that we've had since 2014. We've had stronger linkage between the US and Korea. One of the things that we did this year is the students put together a COVID-19 donation drive for students to collect donations for individuals that were impacted by COVID-19. That led to us being interviewed by what they call the Korea TV, which is also known as the Blue House TV, or for us, the White House TV. And we were highlighted in national media, as here was this international campus that was collecting donations for local community. And so again, we're seeing that impact of our students kind of taking care of their own community. And then, as I shared earlier, this was a big banner year in the fall for our 5th year anniversary. So we had lots of different special events around marketing where we could highlight the campus. We did a Simply K-pop visit. The experience that happened here in Salt Lake was able to articulate back in Korea. Our social media, as we are aware, it's probably one of the areas where we can see some of the greatest increases in the future. It's not our strongest suit yet, and we know that. We're hoping to build that some more. So the number of Instagrams this past year, though, as you can see, we went from 450 to 1,184. So we are trying to increase that. We know that we're going to need to eventually hire a social media expert. This year on our Facebook page, we had 127,000 likes. And then our top exposure for the UAC was with the Blue House and the neighbor blogs. The big thing, though, is that our 5th anniversary, we had a congratulations from a K-pop group. Unfortunately, I don't know who this K-pop group is, but I know that there's some famous K-pop group. But they did a congratulations to us. Our students got to go meet them, part of Aryong TV. They wanted to spend a day with this group, watching them film, watching them do some different videos, and then they gave a congratulations out to us, which is really awesome. Our mental health, it grew again this year. We grew by about 20% in terms of our student interactions. So this year we had 53 individuals that saw us with 169 appointments. In the spring, we did offer Zoom and phone appointments, and our students took us up on that. And so we had a lot of students, particularly with COVID and with what was going on, who felt like they were lonely, felt they needed to connect with somebody. And so our mental health is still a growing population, and there's still a need for that on our campus. We do offer group therapy sessions. In the fall, we only offered those. Obviously, we had to cancel our spring group therapy sessions, but we did have 8 sessions of group therapy with 6 individuals that were involved with that. So the Korean Internship Development Center was, if you're aware, Jenny Park resigned, who had been our assistant director for Korean Internship Development in October. And so we didn't have anybody from October until March when Sonia Kim joined our team. Sonia comes with about 20 years worth of experience in Korean internship development and has a real student-focused and student development framework for how she engages with students. And so even with COVID happening and with nobody being able to be on campus, we still had 91 sessions between the fall and the spring with all those students not being on campus and then with nobody being in the office. And you can see what we're seeing from students. It's still internship and job opportunities. We know that we need to increase that. And Sonia's been working really hard on trying to go out and find more internship opportunities, particularly for our students who don't speak Korean. What are those opportunities that are off campus for those students? How do we increase that? How do we gain that for our students? And then career advising is right after that. Students just wondering, and I think we're going to see that more this next year, what is the career advising going to look like with COVID? How do I search for jobs? What are the opportunities going to be? What are the global opportunities going to be for me? We're teaching students how to do interviews over Zoom this fall. We're going to set up a camera. We're going to have them interview. We're going to have them log into a room to feel what that's like, to kind of see what that experience is going to be moving forward. We know more and more students will be interviewed over Zoom than they're going to have in-person interviews, particularly at least for the next year. Our Student Leadership and Involvement Center continues to grow. We increased by 20 leadership positions. Last year we offered 50. This past year, the year before, we offered 50. This past year we were at 70 individual leadership positions on campus. We have 35 active clubs. And then the spring transition to online programming was a hard transition for us. But we will tell you that we offered quizzes. We offered some gift cards, $5 Starbucks gift cards if students would attend programming, and students were hungry for programming. So we offered a lot of online engagement with students, and we were surprised at the numbers of students who showed up for that. What we were hearing from students was they just wanted to engage with someone else. They'd spent so much time online, a lot of students who were still living on campus, but we weren't offering any in-person programming. And just that sense of I want to connect with my peers in an outside of classroom environment is still one of the biggest things that we offer on campus. And so we looked at how do we increase this online programming component with Zoom programming, with some social media challenges, and we had hundreds of students that showed up and participated in those challenges for us. And so we know that that's going to be a platform that we're going to still engage this fall, with COVID still happening, with our inability to bring students together. Our campus-wide tradition still continued. It was our largest haunted house this year. We offered a double-decker haunted house where you could go down both sides of a hallway. We had our largest student increase. Thankfully, no police were called this year. You heard me speak last year during our haunted house. Our students were screaming so loudly that people called the police because they thought possibly something was happening in the building that shouldn't be. That didn't happen this year. We gave a forewarning to the security guards that we were having a haunted house on campus. We had Pride Week, which again, this year we had a virtual drag show this year, which was a different way of doing a drag show. If you're familiar, I said last year we offered our first drag show. We had 250 people show up for that. This year we did a virtual drag show, and we had, in terms of the Zoom room, we had 327 individuals to show up for the virtual drag show. The drag queens and kings did a panel as well. And for the panel, we had 375 individuals log in. So again, as I said, there's still this need for programming that's happening. There's this need for outside of the classroom programming that's happening. Even when it's online, students are still willing to show up for that. I'll talk quickly about tuition and scholarships. As we've talked about before, I show you this slide every year, but I think what's important is to look at, this is for our incoming students. So in fall 2019, we had 75 incoming students. Our tuition rate was about $9,000 per student. And then in the spring, we had 131 students, and our tuition rate per student is about $8,996. So why that's important is because when I first started, so in the fall of 2016, we were offering significantly more incoming scholarships to students. So we were averaging about $6,800, about $7,000 a student. And one of the things we talked about was our financial viability wouldn't be there. If we couldn't decrease scholarships and increase the rate of return, even if we brought in more students, we wouldn't be viable. And so we made a hard right turn at that point in time, really around scholarships, to keep it at the 10%. We looked at national averages, we looked at averages at the Salt Lake campus, and said 10% is about the average of what your incoming population should pay. Then, sorry, I know this is a horrible slide, but this is what we see in terms of overall students for tuition. And this is, the bottom is where we were at this last year. A couple of things to note. If you look at our summer sessions, so the first time we offered summer was in 2017. We had 23 students. 2018, we had 55 students. And last summer of 2019, we had 95 students. So again, even when our numbers are increasing, we're seeing students take these other opportunities. Same is true with our early spring, which is what we offer in our January term. Our early spring number, we have 40 students that enrolled in 2018, 19, there were 34, which was a decrease. And then this past spring, we were up again to 64 students were in our early spring. Overall, we're also seeing that rate of return on students increase significantly. Our goal for the campus as a total is a 15% scholarship rate, so that we would like to make about $8,500 per student on average is what we would like to see on rate of return for students. So as Chris said earlier, in pure tuition dollars, we made $6.65 million on tuition. I don't include subsidy in my numbers because I'm looking at students and their income. Moving forward, a couple of things just to note again, summer is going to be a big one. This past summer of 2020, we had 125 students enrolled. That is even when we moved online, we had 125 students that were enrolled, and our tuition on summer was $204,000. So those off terms, our summer and our early spring, are still going to be terms that I think we're going to see an increase with. Our UAC fall enrollment, so we get this every week of students that are returning. Fall 2019, we had 275 students that were enrolling. This fall, as of last week, we had 364 students that are returning. So our rate of return on that is 32%. So it's holding true. We anticipate we have about 92% of our students that get retained, and that is holding true. So even at 6 years in now, we are still seeing 92% of our students returning to campus. As of yesterday, we are at 78 incoming students who have paid a deposit, which is above our number last year. We had 75 students that paid a deposit. Of those 78, though, we do know that 7 are going to defer to spring, that they paid their $1,000 deposit to us. but have said they're just not sure they want to come to campus this fall, but they're going to be there for the spring. So if we look at 364 plus our 70 gets us to our largest number of students on campus at about 425 is what we anticipate, 425 to 430 students on campus this fall. That's with them knowing that we're going to offer 20% of our classes online, 80% are in person, and we've really heard no pushback from students around that. So just a couple of things in terms of moving forward. If you're not aware, and we've heard this for a long time now, our website needs a redesign. That it's hard to navigate, it's hard to find things. We have missing information. So we are in the process of a complete redesign of every page on the website, the navigation, how do you engage, who's the target audience. And what we keep talking about is really the target audience needs to be students, and what are students using it for, navigating for, and looking for. So expect by the end of this semester a new website to be launched. The other thing moving forward is just space needs. As we add these new programs, as Greg said, we're going to need to be adding more lab spaces. As we add graphic design, we're going to need to be adding more creative lab spaces. So how do we do that in a building that's already been built, designed, furnished? What do we do to recreate those spaces? COVID-19, we've already talked about the impacts on that. Recruitment still going to be an impact. How do we get students to look at us as a viable option? We will tell you from recruitment, the United States is still going to be our largest international growth. We think Korea is a great option for students when they think about COVID-19. As Greg said, when I wrote this, we were at about 30 cases a day. I know that's changed recently, but I think students are looking at Korea as a safe space. Korea is a safe place to go, even with COVID. Our ability to respond in the moment to it, the small class sizes, just the experience there, I think we will continue to see students coming from Korea. And then how do we do this USC experience? How do we get more students to really understand what it's like to be a Salt Lake City or a University of Utah student without the ability to be in person? How are we going to create some of those traditions? We've also added 2 new positions into student affairs, a residence life or orientation coordinator and a student leadership and involvement coordinator. Those 2 are coming into Korea from abroad. So it's also going to be, how do we have these positions when we're not doing in-person programming? What are their roles going to be? How are they going to really help students come to campus? So, and that is the end of my presentation. So, Mike asked about status of new student and faculty housing. So we built tennis courts. Greg, are the tennis courts open yet?
They'll be open, I think they said the middle of September.
So we built tennis courts. So I think there are 4 new tennis courts. Faculty and student housing is still going to be an issue, and it's going to be an issue moving forward. They had approved new faculty housing. They never broke ground on it. It got killed at the city council. And then new student housing, it's back on the back burner again. Just because with COVID-19, there isn't the largest push to increase student housing, but it's going to be an issue again in another year. I think this year we're going to have to bring it up again.
So what does this mean for all these new students that are coming and our on-campus students? Where will they stay? And is there a plan from the foundation into the Songdo area?
So for new students, one of the things is, and I think I shared, we got a quota system that was based on the number of enrolled divided by all of the beds. So we have enough beds for another year to a year and a half. We're not at our capacity yet, but in a year and a half, we are going to be at capacity. Now, Ghent's already at capacity, so they're having to use a university that's across the street, their housing. And that was the one where we shared. The issue there is that they have a curfew of 11 o'clock. And if the student is not in their room at 11 o'clock, they call their parents to tell them that their student is not in their bed at 11 o'clock. And we decided we weren't going to move our students. So, but there's the continued conversation. There's a local guest house that is offered to turn it into a dorm for our students. And that's a possibility. But it still is coming back to, we need to build a big res hall on campus, one more res hall on campus. But I think the first priority is going to be faculty housing. We are going to be out of faculty housing one more time.
Where will the LEAP students stay? Will they be on campus?
Yeah, and we have room for them. Like we can fill all of our incoming students and all of our returning students. We still have beds.
Great.
Gen SUNY are at capacity.
Thanks. Great.
Also, in terms of our students, when they come to Korea, they do have to do 2 weeks of quarantining. So any student that comes into the country, the Korean government is requiring them to do 2 weeks quarantine. We do have res hall floors that are specially designed for quarantining. A couple of things to note about that. Number one, we do have to have a guard them per the regulations. So somebody has to monitor that. We did have a student that broke that just because he didn't know where to take his trash and forgot that you're not supposed to leave quarantining, so brought his trash to the first floor for those 2 weeks. But all of our students have tested once, they tested negative, and now in the next couple of days, they will all finish all of their testing, and they have all tested negative at this point in time. So again, I think it's a huge thing when our students say, I'm going to go to Korea. I know I'm going to be stuck in a room for 2 weeks, but I still want to go. We didn't lose any, we lost, I shouldn't say lost, one international student deferred to the spring, but all of our incoming international students showed up on campus and did the 2 weeks of quarantining. So again, a huge testament to what the brand is, to what the university has been able to create, and that we're still seeing students come to campus.
In fact, all 62 of the international students who came to the 4 campuses combined all tested negative, and they're all finishing up their quarantine now. So, and just to follow up on Randy's last comment, I mean, you know, one of the things that we're selling right now is the fact that you can have an international educational experience, but you don't have to go to the U.S. And so you can stay close, but you still get to go to the U.S. in a few years. And that is, that's a big sell right now. People are really, that's really piquing a lot of people's interest. So I anticipate that our domestic numbers will continue to go up, and our international numbers will. Because yeah, I mean, we're seeing a spike right now. I mean, they know where the source is. The contact tracing in Korea is incredibly efficient, and so they anticipate those numbers going down again. I would anticipate we'll be back down in the 30s before too long. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. In terms of recruitment, we have a pretty nice story to tell.
All right, Randy, thank you very much for that presentation. And again, I just want to tip my hat and thank you for, you know, all the leadership that you provided. As Greg said, you know, you stepped into that role of the interim CAO at a time when it looked like the whole world was going to go down the toilet. And navigated that extraordinarily well. All right, we're going to take a break for 10 minutes. I think we'll get back on track in the afternoon or later this morning, actually. Stephen Lacey has indicated to me that he has a conflict, and so we're going to defer his presentation on behalf of public health until a later date. For those of you who are not involved in the university's COVID-19 activities, as you can imagine, as the head of public health at the University of Utah, Stephen's job has become incredibly complex over the last month or so, and the draw on his time is extraordinary. So
thank you for letting me off the hook, Chris. Thank you guys.
No worries. So again, let's come back at 10 after, and we'll hear from Lori McDonald.
Julio, where is your background? What's the background photo you're using?
The background is in the San Rafael Swell.
Oh,
We went there late spring, was nice, before Memorial Day.
excellent. Before it got really hot.
Yeah, I just cannot wait to. I mean, it's so hard to go hiking around here. It's just the canyons, the Cottonwood canyons, the Uintas are just like packed with people, and it's just.
Yes. So packed. I'm really wanting to get out for fresh air.
Yeah, we went yesterday and we hiked some, but it's just you need to find parking, and it's just so. I hope that in the fall things probably will get better because people probably will start going more to the south. And
Right, right.
I think that we have for probably at least 6 more months of this.
Yes, yes. I understand that the national parks are, you know, even with international travel being so restricted, the national parks in the US are seeing record numbers of domestic visitors. I think everybody trying to get out and see something.
So yeah, I hope that next spring probably things will get a little bit better, but we will see. I'm very worried about this month what classes start and stuff like that. I mean,
Yes.
some of the my grandchildren are in Salt Lake, and I think the Salt Lake district is doing a good job, but I think that some of the other districts are just crazy what they are doing. It's just have to, we will see.
Yes, we're all, I think, having a lot of anticipation about this very vulnerable time.
But you see how high school students behave during the summer. That doesn't give me any confidence that they are.
I know, and some
even,
of the
even undergraduates, I don't know what they're going to do in the dorms. So we will see.
We'll see.
You will need to have a big whip to keep them.
Yes.
I think we're all anxious to see what happens this week and next on the Salt Lake City campus with all the kids back. All right, Lori, that's the segue into your report.
Well, thank you. I believe I will be rather brief. This has been quite a year of pretty dramatic changes, I should say. And I know that we have thanked Randy for his leadership, his dedication, his creativity, his problem solving. But I have to thank him as well. It has been an absolute pleasure working with him. For our Salt Lake City, for our students from the Utah Asia campus who come to Salt Lake City, one of the biggest changes was the retirement of Carrie Ellingson, who had served as our first Dean of Students at Utah Asia campus. And she really, it was an absolute labor of love to connect with the Asia campus students who arrived here in Utah. And she retired after a 30-year career last fall. I was brand new vice president, hiring a new leadership team. We had talked about, Chris and Randy and I had great plans for hiring a coordinator, and for a variety of reasons that search didn't go well. And then there were all these changes to staffing with the academic role and everything. So I would just suggest that it's been a year of change, but offices here on campus like housing, residential education, International Student and Scholar Services, our Academic Advising Center, the Union Programs Council have really all pitched in to try and welcome our Utah Asia campus students to the Salt Lake City campus. And then spring hit, and we had our largest class here, 90 students, and all of them had to return home. So they're doing well when they're here, but I do want to share that. Can you see?
Yes.
I got a head nod. Similar to what we're seeing in Korea, the students are very academically inclined. They're doing very well academically in terms of their GPA, and we've had some great participation. They are active in the Union Programs Council. I think because of that connection, we have a Utah Asia Campus student on our council, and they hosted a K-pop event in the Union. I think they could have identified who was in that photo. It was a really well-attended event by all students, and I think we're really excited to continue those relationships. We're thrilled to have Randy here back in Salt Lake City. And Randy and Chris and I have talked about the great potential for our Utah Asia Campus students to be ambassadors and spreading the word and marketing the opportunities for studying at the Asia Campus with our Salt Lake City students, and promoting the new LEAP program and all of those opportunities. Of course, things have been placed a little bit on hold, but I'm eager to connect with Randy and come up with a plan for the next year of how we can continue to welcome our students while they're here and promote those opportunities. Randy, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to this. You have been such a connector of all things student affairs. I appreciate you.
Thanks. No, nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe we can make up some time.
All right. All right, thanks, Lori. And as you say, this has been an interesting time. We started in January with 90 students and looking forward to, even bigger numbers. And then all of a sudden we had to send them all home. And I wanted to give an appreciation out to Dan Reed, because one of the things that we had to navigate with all those students going back was making sure that we dealt with the residency requirement for the UAC and allowing those students to continue their education without being put in harm by having to enroll online. So I think we've done a great job of protecting all of our students at the University of Utah. But in this particular context, I want to thank the leadership for their willingness to change a few rules to help the UAC students in this very difficult time as well.
And I think we should mention that allowing to defer the coming to Salt Lake City. We were going to expect about 113 this fall, but I think it's 32 that we'll have with us. Randy's nodding. So, allowing many of them to defer to spring.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's right. Any other questions for Lori?
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Lori. Rob, we'll go to the money man.
Okay, and just for the record, I have not changed my name to Heather. I was in Sun Valley over the weekend, and my computer's still in Sun Valley. Hopefully that arrives tomorrow with me. So I'm using my daughter's computer. Let me see if, ooh, wow. Let's see, Chris, I may be struggling to share my screen. I thought it would work, but it's not pulling up those files.
Okay, let me go grab your report, bring it up.
Sorry about that. Can't even get out.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then, Rob, you can tell me when to advance.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. Well, I'm extremely excited to share the great news of where we are financially. It's been an amazing ride, as Mike described. And Mike said a lot of nice things about me, and I appreciate that, Mike, but in reality, it was everybody. It was the whole campus. It was amazing to see the participation from the whole campus, and not just a few people, but we initially had executive teams of 25 to 30 people, and all parts of campus were represented. So
That's
it was
absolutely
amazing.
true. Very true.
It was a really amazing ride those first few years. Some highlights of 2020, preliminary results, and we're going through our audit right now, is that we're going to be positive net income for the 4th straight year, which is amazing. UAC paid off its main campus debt during FY 2020. And with the first cohort of 13 in that first year, we went 1.2 million into the hole, and that grew to 1.6 million. And this past year, we have paid that debt off to campus. In fact, a monumental change was we started recruiting some U.S. citizens that were eligible for student financial aid, because we were established as an extended campus. So they were getting federal aid that was coming to the main campus, and our main campus, we were simply transferring that to the payable that UAC owed the main campus. So at year end, I think we were $30,000 positive. So actually the main campus had a payable to UAC. And I also know that in one of the accounts at main campus where we collect the revenue for UAC, there's a balance of about $170,000 to $80,000. So again, it really represents about $200,000 that as we begin to pay out some of the salaries of faculty members and some of the costs at main campus, that will go against that $200,000 before we're even in a negative situation. There's always going to be a slight timing difference of when we collect the tuition, when it's remitted to main campus. And so that could fluctuate over the next several years to the tune of 200 to 300,000. But we do not expect that balance ever to get above a basically what I would call a timing difference. So that is fantastic news. And as I mentioned to Kathy earlier today, in those early days, when I would see Kathy walking down the hall, I'm not sure I always wanted to talk to her, but she was very supportive. And over time, we've been able to see the financial success. As has been mentioned, we did not receive a government subsidy in 2019. In 2020, we were able to secure a financial subsidy from the government, and that is expected at this point to go forward for the next 2 years at a minimum, and we'll see where it goes from there. So that was very exciting news also. The other thing is the original agreement expected us to pay rent after year 5. And that's been extended to years 6 through 8 also at a minimum. We kind of watch what they do with SUNY and GMU, and they've extended that for them, and we'll see where that goes. And finally, as has been mentioned, and as we've seen the numbers, as increased UAC students arrive at the main campus, it provides additional financial support to the main campus. And as those numbers grow, obviously the numbers that the main campus is benefiting from these students for their 1 year at the main campus continues to grow. Chris, let's go to the next page. So this is a look at our 2020 results versus our budget. We had budgeted 5.2 million, and that is a net tuition number, so net of scholarships. And we came in about 6.4 million, which is a 22.5% variance over budget. So a great accomplishment again. We did not budget for a Korean subsidy, so that was obviously a positive. And we really don't budget for our book sales because down below we'll see where that comes to play, because it's really a net wash. So while at the end of the year we show book sales and we show book expense, for the budget we don't pay a lot of attention to that. When we look at our salaries, salaries were actually, so again, these are positive on the expenses. Positive is a good thing, negative is a bad thing when it's a look at budget. Our salaries were slightly below budget. Our admin costs were slightly over. You know, as we went into the COVID, some expenses had to incur to make sure that the departments on main campus were being able to track their students. We also, as we've grown our departments, we've increased our costs. So we didn't do a good job of budgeting that in that area. I'm always amazed with our marketing and recruitment, because we tend to put a lot in the budget, but I don't think we've ever spent it yet. Our results exceed what we expect. So Randy and the team in Korea do a marvelous job in watching their costs and using them wisely, and we appreciate that. In country is a category which the Koreans use and which we use for the costs on the ground. Major parts of that can be our insurance expense, supplies, things like that. We exceeded budget, but as I mentioned before, the reason why we exceeded that budget is because we had about $110,000, $115,000 of book expense that we turned around and sold to students. So although there is a negative variance, it's really captured in the positive variance up above of book sales. So without that, we're pretty much on budget. Travel is way down, simply, I think, due to COVID. And depreciation was higher. As we saw some of the pictures Greg showed us, Randy and the team and Todd, we've been doing some expansion, and with some of the subsidy dollars that we do receive, it's given us the opportunity to expand our facilities, which causes higher depreciation. So all in all, you know, we were budgeting because we did not expect to receive a subsidy. We were actually budgeting a loss, and we came preliminarily to an income loss of about $1.7 million, which is about $2 million over budget. Okay, Chris. The next slide tries to look at kind of our history over the last 6 years. And you can see those early years. You know, we lost $1 million. We owed main campus $1.4 million. The second year, although our revenues were increasing, you know, we lost about $600,000, and our balance to main campus had grown to 1.6 million. But as you can see, the growth of our revenue line down below, you can see we grew tuition 2016 to 2017, 53%, and then in the 30 to 40% range in years after that. And you could see our net income continuing to grow. As has been mentioned, in 2019, we did not receive a subsidy, and that's why we saw a decrease in our net income. But really incredible growth. And as Randy mentioned earlier, those first 2 years, we were getting about $6,000 a semester per student. And at that point, we made a challenge and we recommended that we change that strategy. And as Randy pointed out in his slides, that has gone up to about 9,000, which we expected to be when we first envisioned. So that has obviously had a positive impact on our financial statements. Let's go to the next page. So this is our 2021 projections compared against our actual 2020. And I want to give some precursors to this. When we were coming up with these numbers, we were in the height of COVID, when it was just getting going. So we were, I think, being very conservative from a tuition increase. We increased, the budget increase is 10%. But as Randy explained some of the numbers, we have returning students of 364 compared to 275. And we expect to be roughly with the same incoming class, give or take a few students. So, you know, if I was projecting that number today, I would think that's going to be a 25% increase in that range. So I would say this budget is very conservative from a revenue standpoint. You can see the increase in the salaries as our student numbers have increased, and as we bring on these new programs, we have to increase the faculty. And in those early years of some of the programs, it's a lower ratio faculty to students simply because we're still getting our feet wet and getting our feet on the ground with the number of students, yet we need to provide the faculty support. We also expect, again, some increases in the reimbursement which we give to the departments here on the main campus. Well, actually, we're projecting that to go slightly down. We are projecting a rather large marketing and recruitment. Randy talked about some of the new positions we need. We also, with these new programs coming online, we expect to have to spend a few more dollars. I will say, as I said before, Randy and the team never seem to spend all the budget dollars, yet they produce the results. The in-country, again, the change there is simply we're not budgeting for the book sales. And travel, we expect that to go up as hopefully some of the travel restrictions go away, and our depreciation will continue to increase as we have to make capital improvements. Overall, we see a slight decrease in our income. However, I would say that with as we look at our tuition and where we really think that would be, I think we will be equal to or greater than last year. Chris, next page. Couple of challenges, couple of opportunities. Early on, we received about a $800,000 loan from the Korean government. early in the days, it seemed like that was going to be a given. They were offering up to, I think it was 10 million. And boy, we fought tooth and nail to get the 800,000 in like year 2, I think it was. We've never had to get another loan, and we've made minimal payments on that. We expect to be able to pay that off in 2021. We're monitoring how the fall semester goes. A payment is due at the end of September. We will make a determination if we pay it all then or if we simply pay half. The other universities on campus have paid off their loans in the past 6 months to a year. And as I mentioned previously, we expect to continue to receive a subsidy from the Korean government for the next 2 years. We've looked at our cash projections. You know, I do want to give kudos to our finance director on campus, Louise Kim. She has a great understanding of the Korean government, and she's a very qualified financial person. And she's a very conservative financial person. So she keeps us on track in Korea, and she does cash projections. And so in those cash projections, she always puts in that we're paying off the entire loan, that we're building out this, and it's very inclusive. So as we look at those cash projections, we expect to be, as I said, in a position to pay off the entire loan during 2021. So that is my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Rob. More a comment than a question. I think what we see now is that even paying off all the debts that the campus had accrued over time, we still find ourselves in a cash flow positive situation that allows us, from my perspective, to now, with the subsidies that we're going to get this year and next year, to actually invest that money into capital projects to increase the value of the campus and increase the opportunities for everyone on the campus. So I just, again, I think it's an amazing statement that we are where we are right now financially.
It is indeed an amazing statement. I want to echo both Chris and Rob in terms of how the leadership, including not just the leadership, the faculty and staff, and under Randy's leadership and now under Greg's, how efficient they have been financially. Much amazing in what they've accomplished in the money that has been spent. It has been I think, a major factor in that we're now cash flow positive. Rob, I do have a question about the subsidies, the upcoming subsidies. Have they been given to SUNY already? Those subsidies for 22 and on, 21 and on.
Yeah.
SUNY,
correct me if I'm wrong, Chris or Randy. So when we applied for the subsidy that we received in 2020, the Korean government came back and said, you will get a subsidy for the next 3 years. We had the expectation that for 21, we would actually have to go through a whole presentation to them again. But recently, I think over the past month, they came back and said, no, we will be sending your subsidy in January, February time frame, which is the same time frame we received it last year. We don't know what they will do for FY 2022 if we'll have to do a presentation. SUNY and GMU have been receiving subsidies for those years. And I think Ghent.
They're done though.
Huh?
They're done. SUNY
done.
doesn't get any more. They had their 8 years and they're done.
Okay. So that's where we are. Is Ghent receiving subsidies, Randy?
Yeah,
They
Ghent
are.
got double the subsidy that we got, and they're on the same time frame that we are, so they'll get it these next 3 years. The bigger question that we're all asking is SUNY was supposed to start paying maintenance this year, and they were supposed to start paying maintenance in August, and I don't know, nobody can answer the question if they started to pay maintenance. Actually, it was last year they were supposed to pay maintenance. So we have the amounts that we're supposed to pay, so we'll see what happens with that.
Randy, I think they just finalized their negotiation on the percentage that they're going to pay.
Yeah.
So the initial percentage, they negotiated something, and so I don't know when they're going to start paying, but now they actually have a number that they're supposed to start paying.
Well, yeah, that's good. Yeah, they were supposed to pay in August of 2019.
Oh yeah.
So, what
But
are the
whatever they
implications?
negotiate to, we're okay with that. It's hopefully they negotiated to the percentage of the maintenance, not the percentage of their income. Because one of the things that we're trying to do is do it on the percentage of their income, and we would rather be on the percentage of the maintenance fee.
Yeah.
So what are the implications if we never get the money?
Well, I think we've already been told we're going to get the money in January. So, and the difference is that normally we would have to present that that report in October, November. They're now telling us they'll give us the money in January. They would still like to have a report from us, but the report isn't due till to the spring, right? What we don't know is whether or not that report will be essentially a 2-year report to get the one remaining year that we have. Every indication we have, the Korean government is telling us that we have been guaranteed those 3 years of subsidy.
Well, the only reason I ask is my political experience in general has been being the last at the trough when there are long-term issues means your probability of success is the lowest among your peers.
Well, and fortunately, it's not just us, it's Ghent as well. As Randy pointed out, we're on the same track. And the one thing that Koreans have always done is push this idea of fairness to all the campuses. That if one gets something, then all of them get it.
That's true.
Kent, do you have a question?
No, my question's been answered. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Rob?
So, yeah, I think, as we move forward, we probably ought to, Randy, and we'll work with Louise, but do projections a little further out and kind of, obviously as the further out we go, the strength of the projections are weaker, but I think that's a good idea for us to do.
I think it would be really helpful to know exactly what percentage on the maintenance expenses that SUNY got. And I think we have something in I know we have something in our operation services agreement about what that the rent and the maintenance costs would be. I haven't looked at it recently, but I don't know if that's still holding with the other universities. But there was an initial negotiation on what exactly that would be.
Yeah, it's still there, Mike. It's still there. Yeah, it's just what we're negotiating now is what we're paying. So there's the actual fee of what we're supposed to pay. And one of the proposals was, like we said, was to do it on, if you were cash positive, you'd pay a percentage of that versus the actual amount of maintenance. Now, they've already said for the next 5 years, everyone is rent free. The only thing that they're making anybody pay is maintenance.
So only maintenance is being paid. We're rent free for the next 5 years. Okay, good.
Yep.
And the deal that they swung with SUNY was on maintenance, and the percentage was 10%. That's what they said to SUNY, but SUNY didn't like that number, or wasn't willing to pay it or something. And so JJ told me yesterday that it's something below 10%. He didn't know if it was 7 or 8. He wasn't sure exactly what the number is, but we felt pretty good about paying 10% of our maintenance costs because our building is way smaller than what SUNY's is. And so we felt pretty good about that. The other thing is that when I talked to IGC leadership last week, they are seriously back into the business of start looking at bringing in other campuses, and so and starting that second phase construction. I don't know if maybe they've been saying that for years, but they were talking about ramping up again and bringing that second phase along. So when it comes to continual investment, and this is maybe something that, well, when you made your comment, it brought this to mind that the long-term investment in this seems to be ramping up again. So we feel pretty confident about those subsidies. But you're right, and we got to keep an eye on the politics of it for sure.
We're going to be rent-free for 8 years, because what the agreement was is while you got subsidy, you were rent-free. So SUNY got their 3 years, plus they get another 5. So we won't pay rent for 8 more years.
Keep an eye on that second phase. We've Greg, we've heard about it for years and years and years and years. Actually, it was supposed to start I think over 5 years ago. At that time, the commitment, at least it was a verbal commitment that we got, was that they were going to make sure that all 4 of the universities on the campus were succeeding before they went to the second phase. Their definition of success, I never heard exactly what that means, but it's kind of interesting, because if for positive cash flow, they might be looking at, okay, you're successful, ready to go. But the investment in the second phase, just look at the investment in the first phase and see how much the government's going to have to put in if they go to that second phase, which means they're still committed to a larger global campus and they have the money to do it. So we just want to make sure they don't do that at our expense. And it took them almost, took them almost 7 years to get the first phase even going. So I think we're at least 7 to 10 years out for a second phase.
That's good advice. Thanks, Mike.
If you're following the conversation in chat, Kathy is asking for a 5-year look-forward budget that accounts for additional expenses and the subsidy going away. I think also we need to look at our ability to actually bank some cash, some of our money going forward to keep it for additional expenses. And Rob, what's your sense now on what the Korean government's going to allow us to do as far as carrying money forward?
I mean, early on, we made the argument that we would want almost $1 million cash reserve. And when we presented that in our original proposal to the government, they did not balk at that.
Okay.
So I don't have a feel if they've changed their mind on that, but based on original discussions, that's what we were planning on doing.
Yeah, I think that's wise on our part, either to set some dollar amount or some percentage or some number of months of operating costs.
Right.
To build into our budget plans.
Again, I think we have to be careful that they don't look at that reserve as, oh, okay, you don't need the subsidy. Make sure that they see that actually as a reserve, not something that we can pull into the general account and start spending to save them money.
Right.
I worry a little bit about that.
But that's where if you have a good 5-year projection of what you're going to use this for, and you can talk to it, and we're all consistently talking about it, to make them show that it's not something that's just sitting there without a plan. I think that, I know this is always a challenge, but that should at least help.
Yeah. So that's something, Rob, we should start working on this year.
Yeah, we will.
Okay. Any other questions about the budget? Okay, so we'll move to the legal matters, and Alice Whitaker will make the presentation on behalf of the Office for General Counsel.
Hi, everybody. Robert is on vacation, so I'm taking over for him. Currently, we just have really one, my understanding is we have one sort of live legal matter, which is that Korean law requires the university to have certain written rules in place regarding the campus in South Korea. So we have some draft rules that we're reviewing, where the challenge with all the Korean law is to try to figure out how it integrates and how to incorporate it into the university's main campus regulations. So our recommendation is that we keep the Korean law rules pretty simple. We incorporate our university HR policies and state that with respect to the Korean campus, if there's an inconsistency, then the written Korean rules will prevail. They're not radically different, I think, from ours, except to the extent that they have very specific rules around leave and around absences at work, etc. So it's quite specific with respect to those issues. So that's what that's about. And Robert's in the middle of advising on that. So that's really all I have. I did want to tell a story about Mike. We were so much in the trenches at the beginning of this, and he was just brilliant about figuring out like what all the moving parts were and somehow managing them. But one day at a meeting, I said he kind of reminded me of Captain Picard, because we were going into this great black unknown, especially dealing with a foreign government and all of the legal issues and the contracting issues. And he was just brilliant. And I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Alice. And I would never have gotten through it. All of us would have never gotten through it without General Counsel, especially you on the contracts and all. Every time we looked at those contracts coming through, I just remember how the Korean government would make changes, and we try to deal with it, and then we'd come back. There must have been 20, 25 different times you had to look at something new. And I can't say enough thanks to you and Robert. Especially
our pleasure. Very interesting, very exciting.
It was interesting. That's indeed it was. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for those kind words.
So my understanding, Alice, is that as you point out, Robert has consulted on this and on the rules of employment, and those are now in a conversation between Chris Bone and Louise Kim.
Correct.
In the two campuses. So I think we are very close to having that finished now.
I would agree.
Any other questions about legal issues for Alice? All right. Okay, our next report is on the graduate programs, and we'll hear from Julio Facelli.
Unmute. Share the screen. And I bet that now we are ready. So our program of study is very biased towards a research master program. Originally, there was the intention to have a program focused on clinical informatics, but it was clearly not feasible. Many people were very enthusiastic about such program, but the reality is that there were not very many candidates, and the fundamental problem we found afterwards is that clinical informatics is extremely idiosyncratic. It's highly dependent on the healthcare system, and the experience in one country does not translate directly into other countries. So the program that we have right now is a program that is really heavy on research credit hours. That's what the interest is. The current status is that we have Professor Yang Lee, that she has been working very, very hard in this program. She spent probably 50% of her time in Korea, and the faculty teaching the other classes will go to Korea for 2-3 weeks, and now we cannot do that. So all the instruction was changed to teleconferencing in the spring semester, and we will continue with teleconferencing for the fall semester. We have 1 student graduated, 2 are finishing their thesis, the master thesis, and 1 is taking classes. So recruitment is not really going very well to the program. These are the students. Young Park just graduated. Jiang Jong-shin and Wong Kon Lee are working with me to finish their thesis. And we expect that they will graduate in the fall of 2020 or spring of 2021. The challenges that we have, the fundamental challenge that we have is that the Korean masters in informatics are free in the Korean universities. So to compete with that is very, very difficult. So we are focusing in securing research funding so we can provide the students with tuition remission and a stipend, the way that we will treat probably PhD students in the US. We have a lot of people that express interest in the program, but when you talk about tuition, the conversation disappears fairly quickly. So strategically, I think that to keep the biomedical informatics program in the Asia campus is very important because Korea is leading in many areas of bioinformatics. So, but how financially you make that happen will require essentially to have grants in Korea that support the program. The other big challenge that we have, particularly because we have a very small number of students, is the misalignment of the spring semester. On the fall semester, we do very well because we can coordinate the classes in the main campus with those of the Asia campus using Zoom and having the instructors going there for a few weeks. On the spring semester, because there is a out of phase of a month and a half, will force us to teach classes exclusively for the Korean students, and having 1 or 2 students made that very, very difficult financially and in terms of faculty effort. We have been reasonably successful, but Yang Lee, Professor Lee really is the main driver here. She has been able to secure a fair amount of funding, and we have been using that to fund the current students. Still, this needs to be much larger to justify the whole program. We have been working with the Assam Institute to have, they have developed some artificial intelligence tools and they want to have some collaboration. This was going to start this year, but now has been delayed somehow because of the COVID-19. And as many of you know, to establish research collaborations in Korea is a long and a hard process. The big focus is that we continue to increase the visibility of a BMI program in Korea and Asia. We are trying to identify more collaborations, and we need to develop a recruitment strategy. But again, I mean, recruitment strategy will have to be based in having funding to provide to the students. I don't think that the master program that in which student has to pay is feasible in the current thing. So, and because our department is going through a serious transition in changing leadership, final decisions on the program probably will have to be made once that we have a new chair in the department. And I think that that's it. So I will be happy to answer any questions.
So Julio, the MS program that you're operating in Korea, it's a pre-PhD program.
Exactly.
are the students admitted into the PhD program if they complete the MS, or they have to go through a separate admissions process?
They will be accepted in the program if they want.
So one of the big, I think, positives for them is that they will be in a PhD program if they complete the MS.
And it's conceivable that we do the transition remotely. We have already PhD remote students, so we could funnel them through the Korean campus, because they will have done all the classwork necessary, and they can move to do more research. But again, I mean, to start ramping so we see this. The only way that we can justify this program is because it strategically give us a footprint in Asia for our PhD programs. Essentially, like most PhD programs, you lose money, but you recover those money having a research program associated with that.
Right. So your intent is to build that up in Korea as well. So how much tuition are the students now being? I think all the board members know that the graduate programs are self-sufficient programs. They are not part of the undergraduate subsidy or the dollars. They're intended to be self-sufficient.
The tuition is in the neighborhood of $20,000 a year.
$20,000 a year.
Which will be comparable with the tuition that they will pay here as residents, Utah residents. The problem is that you are competing with the Korean programs that are free. And yeah, our program is a U.S. program, is better, but you know, $40,000 is a fair amount of money. And
well, we you know, the undergraduate program faces the same thing. We are double the cost of the Korean university. So the U.S. degree still is a factor for students, and I think it would be a factor also at
the undergraduate program. There is a large number of probably well-off Asian families, Korean families that want that American institution. The biomedical informatics program, particularly on the bioinformatics side, are up to, I have been in conference there, and are very competitive international. So
very much, yeah.
So but that what makes the program, in my opinion, very attractive to us, because you know, if you see what happened with testing on COVID-19 in Korea, that these guys are able to have a testing in 72 hours a week. I mean, that tells you the level of biotechnology that is in Korea. And if you go to Shandong and you see what's growing around the campus, I think that is very, very appealing to have a presence there. But how we are going to do financially, that is a challenge.
That is, yeah.
But and right now the focus really is to be sure that the students that are in the program graduate. And for instance, I'm working with Dr. Wong Hong Lee, and there have been many of these are associated with hospitals and things like that. So there have been a lot of disruption because these people have been called to fulfill operational functions and things like that. But the key right now is to be sure that these students graduate and build up a much larger research component to be able to provide tuition remission and stipends.
So Julio, obviously Young-hee Lee has done very well at creating a research portfolio for the Asia campus. How do you envision getting more of your faculty in Salt Lake City involved in research activities at the Korea campus?
That will highly depend on new recruitments of faculty. Our faculty right now is very, very small. I mean, in the last 5-6 years, we lost probably close to 10 faculty members. So we have either faculty that are at the retirement age or faculty that are too junior. And we expect that with the recruitment of a new chair, that supposedly will happen during this year, there will be a substantial recruitment of mid-career faculty. And I think that those are the faculty that we would like, or at least I would like them to engage in the program in Korea to, you know, and it's conceivable that we could recruit 1 or 2 faculty that will be like Dr. Lee, very much basing their research in Korea. I think that there are tremendous opportunities, particularly in the area of translational research. I think that Korea offers great opportunities because the retroactive access to clinical records in Korea is somehow more flexible than in the US right now. But you know, when you have a new change in the department, a new department chair, we will see how these things play out. I cannot make commitments till we have new leadership in the department. And most of the current faculty are already overfunded, so it's very difficult to entice them to try these things.
Okay. Any other questions for Julio? If not, I'd like to transition to our sort of meeting summary, open discussion component. I have 3 topics that I think would be good to explore in a little greater detail over the next half hour. They are faculty recruiting and just faculty recruitment plans and needs. And I'm going to ask Greg to lead that discussions because he presented to us a plan or at least a list of the types of recruitments that he's going to need. And of course, we appreciate that those appointments are going to have to be approved through the Senior Vice President's office and also through Sarah Projansky's office as well. The second one are where are we going with new student initiatives. We've seen tremendous success in recruiting students. And as I suggested, we anticipate with the addition of 3 new undergraduate degrees that will create another bump like we saw in 2018, at which point, and I will give Greg the shout out that Greg's projection is that we will be in the 800s as far as students on the campus 2 years from now as a result of these new degrees, in which case that's an amazing opportunity and also some interesting challenges as far as those students. And then the third one is certificate programs, a little further exploration of that. As some of you know, historically, we have not been allowed to offer certificate programs on the campus. We were only allowed to provide classes for matriculated students. Now we now have the opportunity to open that up as a result of a new legislation in Korea that actually goes into effect this fall. And so I think that's an important area that we should talk about as part of our future. So let's start with faculty recruitment plan. Greg.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Like as Chris mentioned, you know, we're really excited to get these new programs going. We are excited to see the increased number of students, and all of which are leading us to these opportunities of growing our faculty. I mean, even this morning, you know, here we were talking with Heidi Kim, who's our admission or our advising one of our lead advisors, and we're talking about how challenging it is to make sure that we have enough seats in classes. And so this is a challenge that we're happy to have for sure. And it looks like we'll be potentially able to increase between 7 and 9 faculty, or at least that's what we're projecting our needs to be. Again, those are a couple from graphic design, a couple from electrical and computer engineering, one from psychology, one from communication, one from film and media arts, and then the foreign language ones. I want to wrap just a little bit of context around this that Chris and I talked about last week, and I was able to meet with the IGC leadership on this issue as well. Korean immigration policies are getting more restrictive as the year goes along here, or at least they're paying a little bit more attention. And we're starting to see, in terms of recruiting faculty, that a Korean immigration law says that people with a terminal degree have to have 2 years of teaching experience outside of their graduate program, plus some research experience, and people with master's degree have to have some other level of teaching experience outside of their graduate assistantship teaching experience. So this is on our mind. So when I went to the other presidents last week to talk about this issue, we talked about if anyone else was feeling a little bit of concern there, because frankly, some of our recruiting comes from new graduate students, and this is a great opportunity for new graduate students. We see great value in bringing newly minted PhDs or terminal degree students or faculty here. And so it's concerning to all 4 presidents, actually. And George Mason University had a kind of a close call this year with a faculty member, and they were getting a lot of pushback from immigration. As we discussed, though, the SUNY president is a very good close colleague with the Minister of Justice, who is over immigration issues. And so we sort of have a plan to use a quiet approach to this and a case study approach. If it comes up, then we can approach it at the individual level. But I want all the program representatives to understand that this is part of our recruitment. We'll have to think about this as we recruit new faculty as well. I guess my thought or my question or our discussion can be around what your thoughts are for hiring. I mean, this is clearly a piece that we need to jump on immediately, and something that that we at UAC here in Korea, Randy is there now in Salt Lake, that we want to be available to help you any way we can, so we can hit the ground ready to go and take off running. So I guess I can open it to the floor for anyone who's got any questions or concerns. And again, just to let you know that we're available and want to be ready to help you in any way that we possibly can.
Just a question about a little bit more background on the faculty we've been hiring. I noted that they're from universities all over, primarily the U.S. What is there? Where are they in their careers? Are we getting? How many of those faculty would we have actually lost under this new immigration law? It looks like some of them are that I've seen would meet that requirement, would meet the 2-year requirement.
Yeah, for example, the new faculty member we just hired from civil is he like somebody had mentioned earlier, he was a tenured faculty member.
Yeah.
Some of our UGS faculty, those are new minted or being minted faculty members, and so I don't know. I don't have a comprehensive answer for that, Mike. I can find out, but
does the immigration law apply to anybody who's coming to work within Korea? Must meet the requirements, or is it just for Korean universities? But has anybody looked at, because we're a U.S. university, that in fact we are hiring faculty to work at a U.S. university? We're not hiring faculty to work at a Korean university. Is there any distinction there? Because technically we are not a Korean university, and we should be looked at differently than the Korean universities. I don't know whether they've done that or taken a look at it. And I don't know how many, besides the 4 universities at the global campus, how many other universities would be affected by that. There might be a good argument to say, no, we're not, it's not an immigration issue as much as it is. This is a U.S. university, and you got us here. We need to get U.S. faculty in here. And our understanding was that the faculty meet our requirements. They meet the University of Utah requirements in order to teach.
Well, there's another pool that we're not tapping that might be worth thinking about, and that is you faculty who are on phased retirement. looking for something different to do at the end of their career. We focused on basically hiring young kids out of grad school mostly. If you want to think about people who actually are deeply ingrained in the U experience and can talk about what it's like to be on the Utah campus, that's another pool that would certainly bring that aspect that someone we hire from outside wouldn't really have.
Yeah, that's a great idea, dude.
Yeah, that's a very good idea.
Yeah. And Mike, I don't know the answer to your question per se. We'll certainly look into it. I do know that immigration is getting, they're just looking closer these days at every piece of it. I mean, Nick, just as an example, Nick, who we're bringing in, he's got an Ivy League degree, but the diploma is printed or is written in Latin. So we had to do a translation for the immigration from Latin to English, and they didn't like the translation that we did. They didn't think it was accurate, so they kept pushing back on us. And finally, we were able to convince them that it was actually Yale. Yale, right? Yeah, it was Yale.
It's Yale.
Yeah. Finally, convinced them that Yale was an actual place and this was a legitimate degree. But so they're just looking closer. But I'll find out whether it's specific to Korea, if it's any faculty member coming to teach in Korea, or if we're exempted because we're actually a U.S. university.
So what we have to be careful of, I take it this applies to only immigration, so that faculty who are teaching in Korea now and are Korean, this does not apply to them. So, so what's going to happen, I think, is that they may be looking to come, the faculty right out of Korean universities. And what we have to be careful of is that we don't get an abundance of Korean faculty coming into the UAC. I think that's going to be it's going to be a lot of pressure on us to hire those people, and they're good. But as we know, this is a very complicated issue for us on many levels. The MOE does not want us to be hiring Korean faculty. You wonder about discrimination issues here. They don't want us to hire. The students don't want Korean faculty. At least they don't want all Korean faculty.
Right.
So we better keep an eye on that too, because I think that's something that's going to be. And I think the other universities, I think SUNY is mostly Korean, is it not? I don't know the percentage, but it was very high the last time I looked. And they have not seemed to have much pushback from MOE on that. I don't know, Randy, Chris, do you know anything whether SUNY's had any pushback on their Korean faculty? To your knowledge, no?
It gets brought up every year in their site visit because they have to present on it, but they're like, I mean, there's pushback. There was definitely pushback on Ghent on their hiring of GTAs as full-time faculty, and they actually had to switch all of them from being GAs to being faculty members and pay them a different rate. And that came out last year during when we all went for subsidies, that they couldn't keep them in the current positions they were in and had to offer them all new positions. And that was a big part of why their subsidy was delayed as a result of that.
Well, I think we have been able to track students, and I think it's important that we continue to do that, because we are providing a U.S. university experience, which is diversity, and we have not gone in that direction. If we start to go in that direction, it may change everything for us in terms of, well, not only in terms of the student experience over there, but the whole notion of what the University of Utah looks like from a diverse perspective. So just something to keep an eye on.
Immigration aside, we've got a list of recruitments that need to occur, and I want to make sure that we are thinking about the timing of this and making sure that we get the appropriate approvals from the Senior Vice President's office for those spring recruitments. So Dan, what's your sense of when we need to get these to you?
Well, when are you thinking about wanting to begin advertising, recognizing that we're in a campus hiring freeze right now?
Well, I know that we're approved. Well, as soon as our MOE gets approved for the two new programs, we'd like to start doing that right away. And also the replacement hires we'd like to do right away as well. We know that the process takes a long time. And so I guess what we'd like everybody, if possible, to start in the spring semester, which starts end of February. So our recruitment cycle should start just as soon as we can get it going. I would assume beginning of September or something.
Well, replacement hires are an easier thing to deal with than net new, because so far no college has been authorized for net new hires on the main campus.
So so our new programs are going to require us to fill at least a couple of positions. Maybe Dan, maybe you and Chris and I could talk about this offline a little bit, but what the best strategy for us to move forward to get those filled would be helpful to know.
Yeah, and that's where understanding, as Kathy was saying, really what the financial projections are, and what the revenue is going to be versus the expenses. So yeah, happy to talk about that offline.
Okay, Chris, does that make sense? Do the three of us find some time to maybe with Rob?
I think that's fine. I think Rob and I need to sit down and look at the financial projections and do a 5-year plan. And that at that point, and build into that some reserves, but also the projected growth with the 3 new undergraduate degrees. And start there, and then sit down with you and I can sit down with Dan to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, and just for a little bit of context for those of you not part of campus, the university has suffered quite a few financial hits, and Kathy may want to talk about this as a consequence of COVID, both in terms of lost revenue and additional expenses incurred. And that's the reason why right now we have both a salary freeze and a hiring freeze in place.
Okay.
But happy to talk offline, Greg and Chris, about the needs, because I recognize there are some real ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
thank you.
Hey, Greg, can you have a conversation with Louise tomorrow, just about teeing up a 5-year, and then I'll touch base with her also.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it is like midnight, right? 1, I don't know.
We're sneaking up on 2:30, so I'll talk to her in a few hours.
Dan, can you clarify, and Kathy, can you clarify that the hiring freeze, is it for use of state funds only? Or, so for example, if you're on a grant or if you're on a program that's already...
it's hiring freeze for everybody, all sources of funds.
All sources of funds.
Approval.
So you can't hire anybody on a federal grant at this point?
So you can get a VP waiver for this, but it has to go through. So right now, yes, there is a hiring freeze on all sources of funds.
But there is a VP waiver that the UAC could look at where we're not using state funds, or whether, in other words, the cost,
it has to do with the cost overall, Mike, and where we're using resources. So it is not just limited to state funds, because we're going to need to use other sources of funds to help with smooth over where we are seeing significant losses. And I think, as you're aware, we already did have a cut to our state appropriation, and then we're waiting to see what happens with tuition, where we had no increase. So we will not be getting any increase there. I think it's looking at our strategy and trying to really weigh which things are critical for right now versus which things can be put off for a year, and understanding that whole big picture, which is why the 5-year projection comes in, understanding what costs are there. I understand that UIC is operating in a different environment, but we are looking at this as a 1U. I think the other thing is, if we're looking at increasing the size of our students, really understanding where those cliffs come. We talked earlier about some of the challenges with student housing and faculty housing, how we're going to handle those additional costs if we grow to a certain amount. So I really do see the 5 years being critical, both for dealing with our short-term COVID issues, but also looking forward and understanding where the real capital expenses finally kick in as we decide we're going to grow.
Yeah. This is one of those years where, in years past, $100,000 here and there, we can manage, and smooth over time. Right now, that's serious money.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
Yeah.
So we just need to be thoughtful about what the timeframes and the cost versus the revenues are. Because, as I said, we're not only suffering revenue shortfalls, we're incurring additional expenses.
Okay, let's shift to student initiatives and ask Lori and Randy to talk about what things are on the horizon and what the challenges are.
So in terms of this next year, obviously the challenge is going to be having things in person. I mean, one thing that set the University of Utah Asia campus apart is definitely our offline, our co-curricular experience for our students. So ensuring that students have that U experience is going to be a big push for us this year. I think there was a little more understanding during the spring. It was chaotic around what we did. But what we're hearing from students is they want to have some more in-person programming that occurs. So how do we do that in the building? How do we make sure that that happens so that students aren't so isolated throughout this next year is going to be one of the big ones. The other thing that we're also seeing from students is just they want a variety of more interactions. So what we've talked about is highlighting more community and service learning components. We tried to do that a couple years ago. We started to build up for it. Obviously, this last year, we lost all momentum around service. But one of the things we know about the population that's coming into the university is a strong need to give back to community, to have well-intentioned and well-designed service projects that are connected both to inside the classroom and outside the classroom. So how do we develop those? Korea doesn't have the infrastructure like the United States does around that component. So it's a lot more grassroots that we're going to have to do. We're going to be building more of that on our own than relying on pre-existing nonprofits or agencies that we can work with and go into. We've done some of that in the past, but most of those agencies are only big enough to have 3 to 5 students come. And when we do our day of service, we have about 220 students that show up for that. And so how do we do some bigger, longer term projects with that is going to be an increase for us. Mental health is going to continue to be a need. Right now, we share our mental health counselor with GMU, knowing that our numbers are on the rise. And as we get more US students onto campus, our US students are our #1 users of our mental health counselor. And so we're going to need to increase, if not have her full-time, look at maybe some different staffing models with her. Her time is thin now. We're not there yet to add her as full-time, but I think eventually we're going to be there with full-time as a component of that. And then also with that is our RA system in the halls. With our students increasing there, with more things that are happening in the halls, we've had to do a little bit more training with our students that I think we're going to continue into the future. That's around support systems, that's around early intervention systems, looking at students and making sure that our RAs are going in and connecting with students we're going to be looking at in the future for that. The other thing, and I think we'd say this all along, is how do we get that international feel on campus? We're still about 85% Korean nationals compared to international students, and there's still a large divide outside of the classroom. That our international students are hanging out with their international students, and our Korean students are hanging out with our Korean students. And so we're trying to be much more intentional in our international student programming and reminding our students that they chose a campus that's an international campus. And part of that is also interacting with people who are not like you. And that's both populations. Our US students or international students come to campus saying they would like this international experience, they want to interact, and it's not happening to the level they would like to. And so we have our international student coordinator position used to also oversee orientation, and this year they won't, so that they can completely focus on that experience. But I think we've got to also work with faculty on being intentional in small groups and the work that they're having students do, that they're being intentional around those group developments so that our international students aren't just, again, clumping together and our Korean students aren't just clumping together in the classroom. But that's something I've heard for 4 years. I think as we grow, we're going to continue to hear that. The only thing that will tip the scale is if we're able to get more US students onto campus when there's that kind of that tidal wave of the more leveling out and balancing out between Korean and non-Korean students. That's what we'll see some of those changes. So that's from my perspective what we're going to see this next year, and then in a couple years down the road, what we're going to be seeing happening on campus. Lori, I don't know if you want to add. And then in terms of here, getting students to come, as we said, we were expecting 113 students. We're down to 32. will be here on campus. We deal with the same things here. One of the things that we've talked about is our UAC students, when they come to Salt Lake, they live together. They seek out UAC students to be their roommates, and it defeats, in our experience, the purpose of coming to the Salt Lake campus. That if part of that experience is that acculturation experience and getting to know people who are not like you, living with your classmates from Korea doesn't do that. And so one of the things we're going to be pushing for on this campus is also how do we get them involved in other activities? How do we push them out and get them involved in different student organizations, clubs, and events where they're not just hanging out with other UAC students. They are you, so they know they're a University of Utah student. They're a Ute, they understand that component, so I don't see that as being our big push, but really our bigger push is the how do we get them to spread out on campus and spread the word of UAC to other students to then get that loop going where they're revving students going both directions between the campuses. Those would be what I would see.
I have nothing to add.
Any comments, thoughts on those initiatives for students?
So Randy, what do you do when they come here in terms of, or what will we be doing in terms of trying to hook them up with local roommates?
One of the things we're going to work with Rachel Aho on is trying to see if we can figure out how we disperse them better in the res halls. Right now they can select their roommates and where they live. And we're going to do some inoculation with students before they come about that and do a strong conversation, repeated conversation around, look, choose someone that's not from the UAC. Go live in a res hall share an apartment with other people. And what we have also done is we've gotten some testimonials from UAC students who have not lived with other UAC students, and their experience is totally different. They've talked about going to their roommates' homes, being taken to other parts of Utah, getting to meet and experience people that are not just like the folks in Korea. And then they also talked about how one of our students did that and as part of his OPT, got the job through his roommate's family and talked about, look, if I hadn't met this guy, I would not have had this OPT experience in the States. And so we have that as a testimonial on the YouTube that we're going to show to our students this fall to say, if I keep my network this small, then my network is only this small. And if I increase my network by this, look at how many more connection points I can have, not just in terms of that acculturation piece, but also lifelong friends that are outside my normal group. So we're going to do that piece. But just talking about why do we go to Salt Lake, we've got more testimonials around that, trying to encourage students to break free from just that Korean component.
We're going to do a virtual International Education Week this year for obvious reasons, but it's a real opportunity to engage both the UAC and the Salt Lake campuses. In fact, we're working with the normal teams we would do to do in-person sessions during that week in November and talking about how do we bring people in from a lot of different places. So I think this is a great opportunity to engage UAC students in this and faculty as well would be great. And we're even talking about doing a virtual K-pop dance contest this year instead of the one we just did in the ballroom this last year. So
we really have two issues here, don't we, Randy? One is, and it's an ongoing issue for the students who start at the UAC, the undergraduate students who start at the UAC. And we've always had the concern that, the vast majority, 85% are Korean. And they're looking for the international experience and they're not getting it. It seems to me that one of the things that as we build main campus students coming to the UAC, that connectivity will start in a very positive way so that they make friends and colleagues that as they transfer to Salt Lake, they're going to have somebody they know. So to me, the importance of our main campus students getting to the UAC is critical on so many fronts, but that's a big one because it's unlikely, unfortunately, that we're really going to attract a highly diverse student population into the UAC, given, a lot of circumstances, but we've learned a lot. We're going to have a majority, always have a majority of Korean students. So the more main campus students we can get there, the more that connection starts and the more And when they come to the main campus, they have got friends. They know who's there. They have peers. So I just wanted to emphasize the importance of what we're doing for main campus students to go to the UAC.
So one of the things we didn't talk about today, which I think will be an interesting aspect, is we talked a little bit about, Greg brought up the gaming aspect, but Sherry started this conversation with Michael Young in EAE a while ago, and now Greg and Randy have met with him as well, and he is very interested in starting programming there and potentially bringing the EAE degree to the Asia campus, and probably a gaming team. And I think that, Mike, it speaks to your point about as many kids as we can get moving from Salt Lake to Korea in these types of interactions will help us diversify the campus.
Yep.
And I haven't had a chance to update you all on this, but that group I talked about, that's the gaming team here, they said they'd be more than happy to work and mentor a University of Utah team, and so that we can build some sort of collaborative experience with them as well, which I think would be great. And they also talked about they think people in the industry would be interested in a certificate in gaming if one of those was available too. So I think there's a lot of opportunities around that window, just very low-hanging fruit that we could do immediately.
You know, we talked with the EAE about, Chris, I can't remember, it's 5 years ago? And no, it's even longer than that. They were very interested. And one of the things that we were not able to do was that EAE could offer a certificate program and maybe connect with a Korean university that would offer a degree, and we would offer the certificate. We have a certificate program that's connected to a Korean university, a degree. And the Korean universities, at least when we talked to EAE at that time, were very interested in doing that. But what stopped us was we weren't able to offer the certificate. Yeah. I think we ought to really understand that this change in the law now that allows us to offer the certificate is huge. Yeah. There were so many things we could not do without that certificate program. Now we can have non-matriculated students. We can decide whether we want to connect with other universities to offer a certificate, or their students would take the certificate program from us and the degree program at the Korean university. There's just a lot of opportunity that we really had lined up that got shot down by no certificate programs allowed. We should really take a look at that. That is going to be that's a game changer, I think, for all the universities.
I just want to offer one caution. EAE faculty are heavily oversubscribed for teaching load right now. Our campus focus is actually on hiring more tenure track faculty, not on hiring more teaching faculty. So there are, and in the hiring freeze, and that's really for research and scholarship reasons. So this is all kind of connected to the hiring strategy for the campus. So just encourage you to keep that in mind.
I think also that just beyond gaming, but I think that we need to try to see if we can engage more UAC students in research programs in the main campus. We have a very successful summer research experience where it was mostly virtual for all the students. And I think that there are many opportunities in the main campus that we are not leveraging to get these students engaged in research. And when they come to Utah, then they have already a built-in community that will be engaged with already.
So I'll start the conversation, and others can step in when I say something wrong. You know, early on, we had through both COM and Psych a very active connection to Europe, and we had a number of students that had gotten Europe fellowships and were engaged in research. And about 2 years ago, Europe essentially threw them out and would no longer support them. and they were told that they would have to wait until they got to the Salt Lake City campus, which was really too late. I would be happy to see that decision reversed.
And
Sorry,
what was
Chris.
your,
Also
what was your
help that, I'm sorry, Mike.
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that Greg said, or what I think it was Greg who said that he budgeted some research money for students that could help instead of Europe if Europe doesn't work out, which we didn't have until now. Greg, did you say that?
Yeah, Randy mentioned that, but yeah, we are dedicating money for student research for sure.
That should make a big difference for us.
Yeah.
But also there is a lot of research funding that could be used for this. Many faculty would like to have this kind of relationship. This opportunity is not well understood by research faculty. I mean, the cost of an undergraduate student in many research grants is so insignificant that many faculty will take advantage of this, but it needs to be promoted somehow. And these students should be treated like anybody else on campus. They should be eligible for research programs. And there are many research things that you can do at distance in these days.
What was your ops reasoning for not working with UAC students?
So there was a discussion that this was admittedly before the 1U initiatives, but that those funds were meant for Salt Lake City students.
Does it say that, or does it say University of Utah students?
Well, we had this discussion. You're seeing Cecilia throw her hands up.
Seems a bit discriminatory to me. These are University of Utah students.
And they would not.
I tried. I mean, I talked to them, and I called them, and I talked to them. I wrote to them, and I got nowhere. So,
you know, what was hard to swallow about this was that initially it was fine. It was just there was some change at Europe, and they suddenly said no money going to off campus. Randy, you want to comment on that?
The other issue was also the faculty training, that they felt like they couldn't, the mentoring of students and training of students when they were 6,000 miles away, that getting students involved in research projects back in Salt Lake was also an issue, and tracking. And so, as I said, many of us wrote to them, many of us pleaded. That's why we created our own fund of $50,000 a semester to fund our students to do undergrad research. I mean, I think all of us agree with that needs to happen, and it's a bright point for us. Our goal is within 3 to 5 years to be known as an institution. If you want to do undergrad research, you go to UAC, and that's really what we want to push.
Perhaps we can continue this conversation for maybe 3 or 4 more minutes about certificates. It's very clear now that the certificate programs will be approved. Greg and I talked about some thoughts from his background on public policy. We've had, as Mike alluded to, we had the professional ed people out a number of years ago, and there was a tremendous amount of interest in professional education certificates that essentially died when we were told we couldn't have certificates. But I do think this is something that very broadly we should be thinking about, not only from an educational perspective, but it's a tremendous outreach opportunity to the Korean community.
It absolutely is, and we and they were very excited about professional ed coming. And obviously, these are not degree certificate programs. They're non-degree certificate programs. Again, you could connect those to Korean University should they choose to accept that credit. And that's one of the things that I know that on the professional ed side, where we offer it as non-degree professional ed credit, Korean University does pick it up, can pick it up, and they are picking it up in other areas of the campus as part of their program. We don't accept it as a degree program, but they do. And I'm thinking of Yangtze and Hanyang, both were very interested in what we could offer. So I think it's something to pursue. It's, as I said earlier, I don't want to overstate it, that the loss of those certificate programs is huge for us, and having them come back, I think, is a very big deal that we should be paying attention to. And I don't think it affects the hiring freeze because we're using professional ed faculty, or they hire somebody over there. Actually, they were looking at hiring people. And I don't know how that affects where the campus is on hiring freeze. How does that, so is professional ed, is it also under a hiring freeze? Totally, is everything under a hiring freeze?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, most of the auxiliary programs that depend on revenue are essentially shut down.
Okay.
And it's largely because we can't host in-person experiences. So those that can be offered remotely and electronically have continued. But, you know, for example, our performing arts centers have essentially been shuttered. The museums just are reopening in the next couple of weeks with very limited by appointment hours. And continuing at least the parts that, as I said, relied on in-person experiences, given the restrictions on interactions and travel, yeah, they've largely been shut down.
Okay.
It's an unfortunate consequence of COVID.
I think Dan's point's really important, because the programs that we were talking with from professional ed that the Koreans want were in person. They were not interested in online. At least they were at that time. They really wanted face to face. So that it's just maybe a delay for us to get started in so many areas.
It is important to realize that in Utah we are aggressively expanding certificate programs. And that's largely driven by a desire to respond to state workforce needs and the economic pinch created by COVID. So there's state and federal money flowing in to Skill Up Utah, but it's really about those kind of things, packaging courses and materials both for credit, but also not for credit. And that's true at both the undergraduate level and at the graduate level.
So Randy and I have been talking about developing some certificate programs, obviously non-credit bearing for most of them, that we could deliver at the Korea campus, and leveraging existing faculty expertise, especially delivered over the summer. I know we had a lot of enthusiasm from some of the EAE faculty who wanted the opportunity to travel to Korea. For example, we had a 3D modeling intensive boot camp that we're working on for a while. We're talking to Luming about potentially business communication. I'm talking to Steve Burian about faculty development, expanding what he's been doing with HEC in Pakistan. So we are looking at some opportunities, given especially the relative, COVID situation between the US. And this is building a lot on the types of programs we're running for China here, but given the challenges of bringing people here right now, we thought UAC might be, excuse my voice, UAC might be an interesting for our potential Chinese clients on that as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I think I'm going to call this to a close, and again, thank everyone for their willingness to take 4 hours of their day to participate in this discussion. I think this has been very valuable for all of us. The meeting was recorded, and it will now be transcribed by my office and sent out to everyone. I think there are a lot of really valuable points that were discussed today, and some clear initiatives to move forward. That we obviously we need to be thoughtful about COVID and hiring freezes, and be very strategic in the initiatives that we try to push forward at this time versus hold off on for a few months. That's really all I have. Again, I continue to always be very grateful and amazed at just how committed everybody is to this one you, one global you concept, and how important it is for the university moving forward to continue to be engaged in these types of activities. As we've heard today, they were not simple. And I can tell you from my time in Korea and everyone who's been in Korea at the campus that everything is more difficult in Korea than you would ever think it should be. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And I think that that's a testament to all of us here that we have overcome those obstacles and have created something that is really a valuable asset to the university and maybe more importantly to all of our students. So thank you again. We'll call this to a close for today, and I look forward to working with all of you over the next year.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Thank you.